Rishi Sunak leads the race for number 10 after Boris Johnson drops out of the contest.
Well, a very good morning. It's 6 o'clock on Monday, the 24th of October. This is Breakfast on GB News this morning with Stephen Ambrosi.
Here's what's leading the news for you today. And the former Chancellor Rishi Sunak looks set to become our next Prime Minister after Boris Johnson withdrew from the leadership race last night. In a statement, the former Prime Minister said now was not the right time for him to return.
Well, the other candidate we're watching, Penny Mordaunt, is now facing pressure to drop out to allow Rishi Sunak to become Prime Minister without the decision having to be put to the party membership.
A fraud trial against the Trump Organization begins today in New York as Donald Trump's legal troubles continue to mount. The company run by Trump's sons faces charges of criminal tax fraud.
And planning's underway for the biggest royal tour in world history, according to palace insiders, with King Charles attempting to shore up support for the monarchy among Commonwealth nations.
Would absolutely love to hear from you this morning. What do you make of Prime Minister Sunak? I mean, it looks inevitable now, to be perfectly honest. We'll know definitely by this afternoon. What do you think? Get in touch the usual ways. You can drop us an email, gbviews@gbnews.uk. So, Boris Johnson has ruled himself out of the Conservative leadership election. In a statement, he said, "I believe I have much more to offer, but I'm afraid this is simply not the right time."
Well, that move clears the path for Rishi Sunak to become the next Tory leader and Prime Minister, with Penny Mordaunt having not yet received the 100 nominations needed to proceed to the next round. It's not impossible, but it's looking unlikely.
Sunak and Mordaunt need to submit their nominations by 2 o'clock this afternoon in order to be on that ballot. Tory members then deciding the result if both candidates reach that threshold of 100.
Well, let's find out more. In the studio with us is the Deputy Digital Political Editor of the Daily Express. Dan, thank you very much for your time. What an absolute riot yesterday was. Boris Johnson never formally saying he was in, but very formally saying, "I'm now out."
Yeah, absolutely. At no point had Boris Johnson officially said, "I'm in this contest." But we all knew he was. You don't cancel your holiday in the Caribbean and fly back to the UK if you're not intending to actually stand. He's spent 48 hours holding conversations with backbenchers. We know there was this summit with Rishi Sunak on Saturday night to try and come up with some sort of deal between them. And it became quite clear yesterday that it just wasn't going to happen for him. He claims he has enough nominations that he could stand if he wanted to. But the truth is, when you look at how many MPs were publicly backing him, I'm just not sure the numbers were actually there.
Yeah, that's the key, isn't it? 102, he said, didn't he? But it's looking pretty unlikely now. Because presumably there is an argument to say, isn't there, that if he'd hit the 100 and then refused to back down to give way and it went to a vote of Tory membership, he'd probably win.
Yeah, absolutely. Polling shows that when you're looking at the country as a whole, Rishi Sunak seems to be the most popular candidate in this election. But when you're looking at Conservative members, who, of course, are the ones who would get the decision, Boris Johnson looks like he would beat Rishi Sunak or Penny Mordaunt. So if he had those numbers, if he wanted to come back, he could do. And in fact, he even mentioned that in his statement. He said, "I could be in number 10 on Friday if I ran." He says that if he went to the members' vote, he could be there. So for him to pull out, I think, is kind of probably proof that he wasn't quite there with the MPs.
What's his relationship like with Rishi Sunak right now? Because it has certainly been terse at times. It's not going to be the end of Boris Johnson, is it?
No, I think we'll see probably Boris Johnson go back to slipping away and not doing so much quite in the public eye in the UK. I think we'll see a bit more of tours in the US for now, doing some after-dinner speeches. It's fair to say Rishi Sunak and Boris Johnson don't see eye to eye on a lot of things. You've obviously got the way that Boris Johnson's time in office came to an end, which many, including Boris Johnson, blame Rishi Sunak for, but also real differences over economic policy. That is actually one of the reasons Rishi Sunak said that he resigned in the first place. It wasn't just scandals or Partygate. It was also because of fundamental differences over how to run the economy. So a Rishi Sunak premiership, the idea that Boris Johnson could get behind it and say, "I wholeheartedly support this," it's hard to see.
This is where the Tories are their own worst enemy, isn't it? Because, Rishi Sunak, whether you like him or not, is seen as a pretty safe pair of hands when it comes to fiscal policy at the moment. It's sort of been proved right hasn't he? And yet, he's not necessarily a unity candidate. And if the party doesn't unite, they're still in a whole world of trouble, aren't they?
Yeah, Rishi Sunak, you're right. A lot of the things we've seen over the last month, he was saying in the summer, if you elect Liz Truss, we will have problems. And he can now say, look, I warned you. This is why you should have gone with me the first time round. But that doesn't mean that his policies are popular. I think we need to wait and see actually what his economic plan now is, because despite having decided to run again, he's not actually set out what his economic plan is this time round. And the economy has changed over the last 6-7 weeks. He was still talking about national insurance and why that needed to be raised in the summer. We now know that Liz Truss has reversed that. What would a Prime Minister Rishi Sunak do? Would he reverse that again? Can we have a U-turn on a U-turn? Which, given the fact that they promised in the 2019 manifesto they'd never rise in the first place, would be really quite something.
There's also going to be huge clamour, not just from the opposition, but from many members of the public who say, this will be our third Prime Minister, we didn't elect this person, we need a general election. How's Rishi Sunak going to navigate that?
I think the last thing Rishi Sunak is going to want to do is bow to that pressure, because if you look at the polling, it looks devastating for the Conservatives right now. He will hope to be able to steady the ship and go to the polls at a later date when maybe the support is firmed up a bit. I think the argument that he will be making if he becomes the Prime Minister, let's be clear, that contest could still go ahead and it could be Penny Mordaunt. There is an outside chance. If it is Rishi Sunak, I think he'll be saying, look at the economic circumstances. Now's the last time we need to go for an election. We need to calm the markets and put ourselves back onto sound financial footing.
What about Jeremy Hunt in all of this? The new Chancellor, brought forward some of the mid-term fiscal measures. Now he's calling the 31st a proper budget. How much of that is going to stand? I mean, he's got to be secure in his job, otherwise that is going to freak out the markets.
Now, all the candidates are saying that they're not promising any jobs, but yesterday, significantly, Jeremy Hunt came out saying that he was supporting Rishi Sunak. I'm sure you can expect the two of them have been speaking behind closed doors, and I imagine there's been a wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Jeremy, you're safe in your job.
Yeah, well, I sort of think that's probably for the best, isn't it, for a bit of stability. Dan Falvey, good to see you, as always. Thank you very much. We'll catch up a little bit later on, aren't we?
Yeah.
Great stuff.
Right, let's look at some stories across the other side of the Atlantic. The Trump Organization are going to face criminal tax fraud charges today in a New York court.
Now, the company where former President Trump is the executive vice president is accused of defrauding New York tax authorities.
Well, let's find out more. Political commentator and attorney Steve Gill is with us now. Thank you for just coming along and joining us this morning. Can you explain, sort of summarise for us, the charges faced by Trump and his organisation?
Well, the key here is that Trump himself personally is not really under fire at all. This is all about his company that he once led. This is targeting the company, not Donald Trump personally. Although the fact that his name is on the letterhead is certainly the reason that they're pursuing this. Essentially, the prosecutors are claiming that there were benefits that were given to employees of Trump company that were not reported as taxable income. They had drivers. They had the opportunity to have somebody drive them to work in some cases, for example, and that wasn't being reported as income. And the New York authorities are going after that. On that basis. Keep in mind that there are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of companies in New York that have done the same thing that simply aren't attached to Donald Trump.
This in the wake of the subpoena for the January 6th committee and everything else that's going on around him at the moment.
Yeah, and just about 2 weeks before we have midterm elections where the Democrats in this country are desperate. And I know you guys are looking at our politics over here thinking, well, at least we're not that bad. We're kind of looking over at Britain going, well, at least we're not that bad. So I think both of us are looking across the pond going, well, it could be worse.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a scary time, I think, on both sides, isn't it, at the moment? At least we seem to be sorting things out over here now, Steve. What about Trump's children involved in all of this?
You know, it's interesting because you have, again, the prosecutions from January 6th. They're issuing a subpoena that won't even be heard until well after the midterm elections and possibly after there's a change in power in the Congress that could, repeal the subpoenas, that could reverse course on the January 6th commission hearings overall. Again, anything attached to Trump right now is in the target sights of the Democrats when we're 2 weeks from a very crucial midterm election. And I think what we're looking at politically here is that the Democrats are just trying to taint Trump both to see if it can hurt Republicans in the upcoming elections and also to try and taint him and maybe prevent him from being able to run for president 2 years from now.
Do you think that strategy is working? The public are so used to just bouncing off scandal from scandal to Trump.
Yeah, and I think that when we're looking at the economics here, again, it's kind of like you're facing in Britain, inflation, gas prices, a lot of other issues are much higher on the agenda of voters. And frankly, Donald Trump, the January 6th commission hearings aren't carrying any weight. It looks like in the polls, Republicans are looking to make massive gains in Congress and possibly in the U.S. Senate and really kind of turn the tide in Washington away from the Biden administration. So I think they've thrown everything but the kitchen sink at Donald Trump. It hasn't worked yet. And I think one of the reasons is that right now in the U.S. political scene, everybody's looking at the policies of Trump more than the personality of Trump. And right now, the policies that he was doing look a lot better than what we're seeing in this country right now. I think the presidential election starts November 9th, the day after our midterm elections. And if President Trump is still looking to run for president, I think it turns back to his personality rather than his policies, and that may not bode as well for the Republicans.
OK. Steve, really good to talk to you. Thank you. The grass is not always greener on the other side of the Atlantic, clearly.
Actually, I was in the States over the weekend.
Some of us have a weekend in New York, don't we?
It was for a very special occasion. But what was interesting was in the queue, we were a bit delayed on our way out there. Liz Truss had just resigned.
Yeah.
So it's one of those moments, when everyone has a conversation with strangers just to kind of check and sense the temperature of the room. And this one lady, I was overhearing her conversation in the queue to get on the plane, and she was talking to a Brit, and she said, sometimes we have competitions about who's got a worse leader, you here in the UK or there in the US. And I wonder actually how this turmoil for us politically is playing internationally, and it's seeping into the conversations that people have thought our democracy and the way that we've sort of churned through chancellors and now prime ministers is laughable. And what impact does that have?
Well, I think it's a short-term measure. I think generally we're seen as pretty stable, and hopefully we will get back to being stable.
And I think if your own politicians are maybe not coming up to scratch, it's quite easy to sort of look and laugh elsewhere. But this morning we'd like to know what you think, particularly Rishi Sunak as Prime Minister. He lost in September. It looks like he's going to win in October. Are you cheering that or despairing? You know the email, gbviews@gbnews.uk.
It is 6:13. Let's bring you up to date with the other main stories this morning. And Defence Secretary Ben Wallace has refuted claims from Moscow during a phone call with his Russian counterpart that Ukraine plans to use a dirty bomb against them. A dirty bomb is one that contains some nuclear material. Mr. Wallace has warned Russia not to try to use it as a pretext for its own efforts to step up the conflict.
Back here in the UK, and 4 Just Stop Oil activists have been arrested for willful obstruction after blocking traffic on London's Abbey Road. Yesterday, protesters recreated the pose from the cover of the Beatles' Abbey Road album at the crossing, while stopping cars on both carriageways.
National Highways has announced that a £44 million fleet of new gritters that can get up to 50 miles an hour has been assembled as the country prepares for freezing conditions on motorways and A roads this winter. The new faster speed of the gritters means that the salt can be spread at a quicker pace, reducing delays on the roads. I'm surprised gritters didn't go that fast already. Tanks can go at 50 miles an hour. Why can't gritters? Well, they can now.
I would say the problem we've got right now is potentially not looming snow and ice, but rain.
Oh, the rain's terrible at the minute. Dreadful driving on the... If you're getting on the roads, at the motorways particularly, surface water's terrible, so be really careful.
And if you're getting public transport and you're getting the bus, stand far back from the road and away from puddles. The puddles were so huge yesterday when I was travelling back from Central London home via bus. I was sat inside the bus, and they've got those tiny little sliding windows. I was getting wet inside the bus because the volume of water inside those puddles was so great that it was coming back in through that teeny window.
Did you not shut it?
I did then, but it was about 4 seats ahead of me. And I was sat there thinking, why have I just been splashed? Well, that's why.
I'll tell you what, the thunder and everything, thunder and lightning last night was terrible, wasn't it? Well, I say terrible. I quite like thunder and lightning. as a spectacle.
From the theatre of it.
The theatre of it, yeah. But it's, oh man, look at that. Where's that from yesterday? Oh, that's London, apparently. There you go, look at that. It's very windy.
An umbrella.
Wasn't that windy where I live?
On the radio, some poor person's umbrella's just flown away, which is a bit miserable.
Like a comedy. It's like a comedy item, isn't it? Anyway, look, coming up after the break, we're going to be finding out what's behind the rise of so-called quiet quitting. First, though, here's your weather. And looking ahead to the weather, the UK is breezy and mild today with sunny spells and scattered locally heavy showers for most. Let's have a look at the details.
It's going to be breezy, especially around the coast of southwest England, but mainly dry with some bright or sunny spells. There's going to be some scattered, occasionally heavy showers likely, particularly in the west.
And mostly dry across London and the southeast with plenty of sunshine. Rather breezy, especially along the Channel coast where the odd shower is possible.
What about southern and western Wales? Well, scattered locally heavy showers. It's going to be interspersed with some sunny spells. It's rather windy, especially across the coast and the hills. It should feel quite mild, though.
A bit breezy, but mostly dry in the Midlands. Plenty of sunny spells for all. However, the odd shower possible, most likely towards the west.
Now, the east and northeast of England is going to be mostly dry with patchy cloud and sunny spells. The cloud could bring the odd shower. It's feeling nice and warm, though, again, particularly for this time of year.
Scattered, locally heavy showers affecting northern and western Scotland. There'll be some sunny spells, but a brisk wind too. Going to feel nice and warm, though, apparently, in the sunshine.
There's going to be a mix of sunny spells and scattered heavy showers across Northern Ireland. The showers most frequent there in the north and the west. It's going to be breezy, but feeling quite mild.
So scattered, locally heavy showers continuing, especially in the west of the UK. Drier and brighter across the east. That's your weather today.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness, brilliant.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back. It's 19 minutes past 6. Still to come on Breakfast this morning.
At 6:45, are you getting ripped off when it comes to booking your holiday? We'll find out about the UK websites charging customers hundreds of pounds more than their European counterparts.
And in about 50 minutes' time, we're going to be speaking to the Shadow Attorney General, Emily Thornberry, as the Conservatives look set to make Rishi Sunak their next leader.
So get in touch. If you want to join in the conversation, we would love to hear from you this morning. You can email us, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Now, with the war in Ukraine and political instability back home continuing to fuel economic turmoil, don't we just know it, a recession is becoming more and more likely.
It's reportedly leading to a rise in quiet quitting. Now, if you haven't heard of that, it's a phenomenon in which an employee feels trapped in a job and decides instead they'll do sort of the bare minimum, so just enough, that's my laptop there, working hard for me this morning, rather than going sort of above and beyond, not staying late, not doing that extra bit of work.
Yes, I don't like those sort of people. Got to be honest, that annoys me.
Yeah, you don't find many of them in newsrooms. There's not...
No. But in any place, you're straight out the door at 5 o'clock, all that sort of thing. Anyway, let's talk to Ian McVeigh, who's a workforce planning expert. Morning to you. Really good to see you this morning. I find this incredibly disappointing, as I probably made quite clear there, that people, is working to time, as we always used to call it.
Yes, good morning, Stephen. Morning, Rosie. You were very clear with your opinion there, Stephen. I think the notion of quiet quitting was well expressed by Rosie. But it's a real phenomenon based on the Vizier survey that we conducted last month across 2,000 respondents. 30% in this current time are looking at quiet quitting, which means their employers are not getting the best out of them day in, day out. And I suppose we have to address some of the reasons as to why that may be.
Well, yes, that's a fair point. But should the onus on that be on the employee, who, frankly, in this day and age, should be grateful for a job, or to the employer, who's perhaps not looking after their workforce in the way they should?
Yeah, I think it is true. We should be grateful for the jobs that we have. And I think that those jobs, however, the conditions in which people are working, particularly with the cost of living crisis, means is wage inflation keeping up with cost of living crisis. So again, a survey that Vizier conducted in the summer said that 94% of households were struggling to keep up with the cost of living. 79% of those respondents expected their managers, companies to be doing something about it, and only 71% felt that they weren't. So it is a two-way relationship, employer-employee. And highly engaged employees is in every employer's interest to get the very best out of the people working for them. There's a number of factors in which they can do that, obviously, and pay is one mechanism. But understanding your employees, understanding where you meet them individually, where GB News meets you, Stephen, today, and you, Rosie, today, as individuals, and knowing what makes you both tick, I think is every employer's opportunity to get this right moving forward.
There's also been this real rise in people turning to, I don't really like the phrase, but, a side hustle. Perhaps people are saying, well, I'll just do enough as I need to, but not go further. And if I've got that extra energy, I'm not going to give it to my employer. I'll just do it to serve my own ends and do my own thing on the side.
Yeah, and again, not knowing where that intersects each individual's life as to why they're doing a side hustle, if it is based on the cost of living, and their wage in their current job doesn't help them make ends meet, then one could understand why they're having to look externally for a side hustle. And by the way, the side hustle may be outside of their 9 to 5 or contracted hours. It may be they come back at 5 and go and do a second job. So I think what's happening here is the rise of the cost of living is having an impact. Wages need to keep track with that impact. Obviously, that has an impact on profitability for companies. So right-sizing this is not an easy answer, but this is, I think, a real pain amongst the working population. So companies, need to use perhaps tools and technologies such as Vizier, for example, as a way of understanding where their employees are at, down to an individual level, and therefore empowering managers, perhaps managers at scale, to have real conversations with employees around why they might not be feeling engaged, or why they may be struggling, or if they are doing a side hustle, how they can maybe bring more of that productivity into their existing working day in their contracted employment.
Yeah, so it is all about conversation. I mean, do you know what? It's like any part of life in a sensible way, isn't it? A bit of transparency, a bit of conversation, and listening to both sides to make it all work.
That's right. I mean, basic common sense often can prevail, and understanding in the labour markets where skills are needed as well is the same part of this conversation. You know, we're seeing the political arena today where skills planning for certain parties could well be in train. That's true for companies. Have they got the right skills for the future? We see that within planning for public sector services and perhaps shortage of nurses. So making sure the right skills are in place for companies for the future in a world in which, let's face it, there's 1.3 million job vacancies in the UK as we stand, and having the right skills balanced to those jobs, albeit we're at the lowest unemployment since 1974. So understanding all of these multiple effects for companies, understanding, how an employee is feeling, what skills are needed, how employees are motivated within the work that they are doing. I'm a proponent of technology, and I believe technology is a great way of enabling companies and employers to have that conversation at scale.
Ian, really good to talk to you this morning. Thank you very much indeed. Oh, excuse me. It gives you something. I tell you what, it gives you something to think about, though, because my initial reaction is, you shouldn't do the quiet quitting. As an employee, you should be grateful for your job. You should work hard. You should put in the extra. You should impress the boss and all that sort of thing, which I do agree with. And yet I have been in the position with an employer where I feel totally unrecognised and, they pay you the money, but then there's no recognition of actually the work that you're doing. So actually I've been in the position but I'm still taking the side of the employer.
But I don't think you'd be a quiet quitter, would you?
Well, no, but it's this life.
Or you might be a noisy exiter to say, take me seriously, I'm working really hard.
Yeah, it's very frustrating if you don't feel recognised by your employer.
I think there's been a bit of a generational shift as well. I think particularly millennials and their parents grew up just working as hard as possible, trying to impress. And the next generation that are coming into the workforce say, well, I'm going to be working until I'm not going to have a nice pension and retire early. So this job's got to work for me. You want me to do more? Well, no, you're not paying me for those hours, so I'm not going to do it. So those people need to be encouraged to work a little bit harder, and employers need to think, how are we going to attract the next generation who think, I'm not going to go the extra mile because maybe they've been leaning on the people who would.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Let us know what you think. gbviews@gbnews.uk. I'm guessing most of you are thinking, work. If you want the job, work hard for it. I do sort of agree with. I've got to be honest. Let us know your thoughts. And after the break, we're going to take you through the papers with Dawn Neeson and Nigel Nelson.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, We're
on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back. It is 6:30 on the nose. Let's bring you up to date with some of the headlines today.
And we're going to go through the papers shortly. It is front page of almost all of them. Tory MPs will decide today who they want to be the next Conservative leader, or the choice might be made for them after a dramatic withdrawal by Boris Johnson last night. The former Prime Minister claimed he had the over 100 votes needed in order to secure a place in the contest, but admitted he couldn't unite the party.
BT and Openreach employees are going to strike today over pay. Members of the Communication Workers Union, including 999 call handlers, are walking out for 24 hours. BT wants a pay rise of £1,500 and will take employees, I imagine, and will take further strike action if needed, according to the union.
The NHS has launched its annual nationwide drive to recruit more nurses as it tries to fill vacancies across England. It's called the We Are the NHS campaign. It comes as the staff are preparing for a challenging winter with the combined impact now of flu, COVID and record nursing vacancies.
New research shows house price growth in cities is outstripping increases in surrounding areas. This is from the Halifax. Property prices across Britain's cities have grown by 9.2% since the start of the year, compared to 7.9% on average in surrounding areas. Loads of you getting in touch on Rishi and number 10. Sue says, good morning. Rishi for Prime Minister, a definite no. He looks like a little wooden boy puppet, the ones with strings. Sorry to be mean, says Sue, but he doesn't look like Prime Minister material. I've got to be honest, Sue, I think that is a bit mean, to be fair. I do think that's a bit mean. Steve says, we're now a banana republic and the Conservative Party is finished for decades. But Elizabeth says, Rishi as new PM, brilliant. Fair play to the Conservative Party, the first female leader and now probably the first leader of Indian heritage. Good luck to him.
Keith, though, just about sums Boris up, he says. Returns from holiday to try to get support for the leadership bid. He's an MP in Parliament's in session. He should be at work. We were just talking about quiet quitting. He said, if I'd gone on holiday in term time when I was working as a teacher, I would have been sacked.
Yeah, I know a few prominent MPs who are... Well, they just got back from holidays. Because they call them business trips, don't they?
Shall we go through the papers? Unsurprisingly, two men make the front page of all of them. It's either Boris Johnson, who, according to the Metro, has bottled it, or the Daily Telegraph, Sunak. Is he going to be the next Prime Minister? Well, joining us to discuss all of this is editor of the Daily Star, Dawn Neeson, and
former
editor, and the political editor of the Sunday People and Sunday Mirror, Nigel Nelson. A very good morning to both of you. Nigel, let's start with you then. Front page of the Telegraph, but we could have picked any this morning. Sunak likely to be the next Prime Minister. How do you think the day is going to go?
Oh, I think it's almost certain he'll be Prime Minister by the end of the day. Well, I mean, the day's going to go is that the nominations close at 2 o'clock. So unless there's somebody in the wings out there who's actually been quietly ferreting away to put 100 names together, and there's still about 150 Tory MPs who've not actually declared, then it's almost a certainty, I think a certainty, that Rishi Sunak will be PM. And so we'll have a new PM by this afternoon, effectively, which means that Liz Truss will have to be packing her furniture and her suitcases to leave Downing Street probably tomorrow.
I told you so, sort of attitude, isn't it? I mean, he can be confident enough to say, well, look, and if the membership actually are a bit unhappy about it, he can still say, well, look, this is what I said in all those 6 weeks of hustings. I said this was going to happen. And it did.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the one thing he did do was predict that if Liz Truss put together a mini budget like she did, the markets would go haywire and the pound would drop. I mean, in fairness, that Rishi Sunak did always predict that. I mean, the Boris Johnson rushing home from holiday and stuff, it was a bit of a pantomime. I'm not sure how serious he was about actually standing anyway. That I think he came home to test the water. If hundreds of MPs had said, "Oh, we must have you back, Boris," and if we'd ended up with Rishi and Penny at his feet saying, "Yes, Boris, you're the man to lead us," he'd have gone ahead. What he's actually done now is say, "Look, not my time," but he's still threatening to be back. In other words,
threatened.
Well,
go on.
I take
Careful the language. Well, I know you were. Dawn, looking at the eye. I mean, they talk about the remaining two candidates to get it, promising to get tough on immigration. I mean, can't count Penny Mordaunt as she's not actually going to make the ballot paper.
She's not. I mean, what has she got? 25, is it so far? She's not. And interestingly enough, a friend messaged me this morning. He had, over a week ago now, received a text from Tory MP saying, Rishi PM, Hunt Chancellor, Penny Foreign Secretary, a done deal. That was over a week ago. And it looks like where we're heading, doesn't it? But, I mean, yeah, the eye have gone on the immigration line as well, just to give it a different spin on what's happening. And it's top of the to-do list for both of the hopefuls. One of them slightly less hopeful than the other one would suggest. Rishi Sunak is putting immigration high on his agenda now. He made headlines this summer when he proposed ditching our accommodating asylum seekers in hotels, which is costing taxpayer millions and millions of pounds and causing an awful lot of angst, especially seeing as people are struggling to heat their own homes this winter and paying to put asylum seekers up in hotels. Rishi then suggested putting them on cruise ships, which was laughed out of because it's probably illegal. But he's talking a tough talk on it. Penny hasn't been quite so strong on it. She's concentrating more on the economy and housing and foreign policy. But she's also now suddenly developed a passion for it and is saying that she will be tough on it as well. And they both are supporting the Rwanda policy. But I do think it's all a bit of a moot point as to what they say on immigration at the moment. I think it's a bit of a, as Nigel was saying, a bit of a done deal as to who's going to be our new Prime Minister. But it was interesting last week because Nigel predicted this when we were working together yesterday. Nigel predicted, didn't you, that this would be the case and that Boris would pull out, as it were. And there's a joke in there, but I'm not doing it too early.
No.
Choke on your golf plate. I promised I wouldn't. But you did predict it. And I must admit, I got the message last night when the news broke and I go, oh, my gosh. So it's, but as you say, it's on the front page of all the newspapers. And I think, as Nigel says, by the end of the day, we will have Rishi Sunak as a new Prime Minister.
Is he going to have the same personality and charisma needed to secure support from the whole party?
No, I don't think he will. I mean, this is the problem you faced. I mean, if you could have had some Frankenstein monster of Rishi, I know, it doesn't bear thinking about, of Rishi and Boris combined, where you've got the personality and the appeal to the public that Boris Johnson has, but the financial wherewithal of Rishi, then I think you would have been on a winner. But the two of them could never really work together that closely, could they? So,
do you need that sort of personality at the moment, Nigel? Well, isn't it about fiscal responsibility?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think you want as a Prime Minister, you want a bank manager, really, and somebody who's cautious, calm. Effective, all the things that Liz Truss wasn't and Boris Johnson wouldn't have been if he'd been Prime Minister again. So it does seem to me that everything has shifted a bit to that kind of thing. Interestingly, if Rishi Sunak does take over, it'll be fascinating to watch how he deals with Keir Starmer. Both of them are very similar. Keir Starmer's very cautious, managerial, and so on. So I think that when the election finally comes, sooner the better, but when it does finally come, the question then will be over competence. It'll be who can actually manage us best.
Sooner the better. I don't know about that.
Well, I mean, the country at the moment is perfectly clear from every single opinion poll that people want to change.
Yeah, but there isn't the problem with that, and I put that to both of you, and I've put it to various Labour members of Parliament as well over the last few days. It's all well and good, but that doesn't do anything to help the country over the next couple of months, which is what it would take.
No, it'll be a snap election. You can get the whole thing over within 3 weeks.
That's still 3 weeks we haven't got, isn't it?
Well, I mean, I do think that you have to work on the basis that people have had enough of this government. They've kept making a mess of things, and the mini budget was kind of the final straw. if you think that Labour has a better plan to actually do it, then as we live in a democracy, we ought to be giving people a chance to make that decision. The only way of doing that is a general election. The only person who can call it is the next Prime Minister. So a sense of fair play, really.
But, you know, in 2019, the Conservative Party won with a landslide victory. We elected the Conservative Party. They still have the mandate to govern. So why on earth would they call a general election? They don't need to.
Well, they won't, because they'd lose.
They'd be turkeys both for Christmas, wouldn't they? And so it's actually not going to happen. But I agree with Stephen. I mean, you know, even if it's only 3 weeks for a snappy election, I mean, that takes us pretty much into December. Those heating bills are coming in, the mortgage has gone up. I mean, we're all struggling. I just want someone to lead us and to sort this mess out, rather than all this infighting.
Nigel, let's have a look at the Times, should we? And the Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace, issuing this warning over... there's these claims that Ukraine is using dirty bombs. Which,
this is the Russian claim. It's another sort of that we're supplying the materials. Us and the Americans are supplying the materials to Ukraine to make a dirty bomb. As a result of that, the Russians are yet again threatening to use nuclear weapons in Ukraine. The risk of all this is being put as low, which helps a little bit. But I don't know why the Russians keep sort of going for this rhetoric, because any kind of nuclear weapon used in Ukraine would be a monstrous escalation of the situation at the moment. It would bring us one stage nearer to a possible nuclear war. And it seems to me that the one thing you ought to keep down, I mean, with the war going on, it's bad enough as it is, just keep the rhetoric down, just keep those words down.
I mean, it just seems very... I mean, because even if that was the case, that they were using dirty bombs, they'd be using them within what they claim to still Ukraine.
I think the claim is they're using them, but they've got the materials and they're ready to use them.
But I mean, that would render parts of Ukraine uninhabitable for Ukrainians.
Yeah, it would be a mad thing for the Ukrainians to do, and obviously dangerous for the entire world if the Russians did it.
It's probably Putin just looking for an excuse, isn't he, to detonate his own dirty bomb somewhere.
Well, you do wonder.
Should we change tack somewhat and look ahead to, dare I say this word, this Christmas? Families desperate for something to celebrate and also to be able to afford to celebrate properly. But it looks like this story in the Star, Dawn, may be more tricky to do that in the pub.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I went through the Daily Star because I wanted to find a feel-good story that wasn't politics. And
you failed.
I failed miserably. Even the Daily Star, which is put on earth to give you a bit of a laugh on a Monday morning. Christmas parties are in peril as many pubs even, and I haven't been drinking yet, pubs are forced to close over the festive period. Now, they're not closing for good. They're going into hibernation so they don't have to pay the heating bills and the business rates, which are all gone up, and their staff, more importantly. It's the staff you worry about. So, you know, if you are booking a Christmas party already, make sure the pub is actually going to be open before you do so.
But isn't it going to be I mean, presumably... it's a time where they're generally taking more revenue over Christmas, isn't it?
But the heating bills and the business rates have gone up so much, Stephen. They can't even balance the books that way. I mean, this is the problem so many, not just pubs, but you know, the hospitality industry has got. And it's like, but it's the staff working there you have to feel sorry for, because a lot of them are on sort of like very low wages in the first place and sort of like 0 hours contracts, and suddenly they're going to be laid off over the Christmas period as well when they've got bills to pay still. So it's really not good news, and it's Xmas is stuffed, according to the Daily Star. So,
oh, well, that's a headline they had to use.
So it's all around yours then?
All around mine.
For that Christmas party.
Bring it round. Bring your own booze, though. I'm not buying it. You want to drink it, bring it. Nigel, property prices in the Daily Mail. I don't know quite what to make of this. Property prices in the centre of cities are going up faster than those in the surrounding areas.
Yes, well...
Apparently. I don't know if that's... Is that normal or not?
Well, at the moment, there's a bit of a lag. So property prices are still going up based on what things were before mortgages suddenly went shooting through the roof. So what you're going to see is that property prices will start going down because people won't be buying homes or indeed selling them because of mortgages. But at the moment, we've got a situation where They're going up more in cities, so 9.2% in cities, and less in rural areas, about 7.9%. Leeds seem to be booming, 13.6%. The argument is that a lot of people are going back to work after COVID. So a load of us went out and went for the rural dream. We all got our places. Yeah, got our place in the country. Now bosses are insisting people get back to their desks, and so they need a home back in town. Let's see, an awful lot of people are still able to work flexibly, work a bit from home, bit from the office, which means that if you're travelling in from outside, you can always get into town, but you don't have to do it 5 days a week. You might do it 2 or 3 days a week.
Yeah, but it's just, it's when you look at these figures, you just think, how on earth are anyone going to get on the housing ladder?
Yeah, well,
with probably, because I look at this and my initial reaction is, as someone who owns a house, you think, oh, great, I'm making more money on all of this. It's all clocking up. But then you think, well, no one's wages, frankly, going up by 9.2% or even 7.9%.
No, and you're talking about, house prices there about 130,000 more. It's an awful lot of money to go and find. And of course, the worst people to suffer from this are first-time buyers. It's young people who really can't get on the property ladder.
Lots of people who can't work from home, nurses. There is a record shortage of them. Dawn, this is in The Guardian. We just mentioned it earlier in our sort of a roundup of the news. There's this new campaign, it happens every year, to try and recruit more people to say, I'll do that.
Yeah, this is a multimedia blitz, it's been described, to raise nursing's profile as a worthwhile career by featuring patients who benefited from nurses' skills and dedication during their recovery from ill health. Well, that's what nurses do, obviously. And the bottom line is, there are 46,828 vacancies, which is the highest ever nursing vacancies in the NHS at the moment. And an estimated 40,000 nurses have left the NHS recently. Now, the problem with this story, as the Royal College of Nursing have pointed out, is it's all very well having this social media blitz and selling nursing as a marvellous career, and it is a marvellous career, it's incredibly fulfilling, but it's also incredibly poorly paid. And this is the problem you've got. It's like, rather than spending all this money on advertising what a great career is, why not start rewarding the people who are actually doing it, and they work incredibly hard on the front line. Stop charging them to park their cars at the hospitals they work at, and actually make it a rewarding job to do financially. Because it's not at the moment. And the NHS, you can argue the case of it needs reorganising, too much money, not enough money, etc., etc. But the bottom line is, when you've got managers in the NHS, diversity managers, diversity is a good thing, don't get me wrong, on sort of like 60,000, and the highest paid manager up to £400,000 a year. Yeah. And your average nurse is on 30,000? And many less than that if you're on the lowest pay grade.
I'm just looking at the bands 1 and 2, so when you're first sort of, actually up to like 6 years on band 1 and 2, like under 22,000.
Well, this is the thing, Stephen, how can you survive? Especially, as we've just discussed with the property story, if you're working in a city hospital. You can't afford to live in that city, you can't afford to commute, you can't afford to park your car. All very well selling it to people, come and be a nurse, it's a wonderful career. It is, but you can't afford to do it.
No, I know, but this is I mean, how much would it cost? It's more money throwing into the NHS. It's where the NHS is a bottomless pit, isn't it?
This is the problem. It's the 5th largest employer in the entire world. I mean,
you're just below Walmart, I think, isn't it now? The NHS.
Yeah, and the Chinese army.
That's right. Yes, and the Indian Railways.
Honestly, I just don't know what the answer is to this. I mean, I despair at the NHS at times, and I'm someone who, as a type 1 diabetic, who relies on the NHS, and I've got an amazing team that I go and see. But even so, when you look at the figures, you say, I don't know what to do. You can't suddenly start paying everybody more.
I do think you have to rethink the NHS a bit. I mean, we still work broadly on a model that was designed in 1948. Doesn't work in 2022.
There's a small. I've got a small personal example, if I've got time, quickly, of the waste within the NHS at the moment. A member of the family is receiving treatment for cancer care, and they keep sending various. We ordered some supplies to be sent to them so they could sort of like do some stuff at home. And the NHS keep sending this particular item, and we've said, look, we don't need any more. We've got enough. Thank you very much. Oh, that's fine. Just get rid of it. No, we can bring it back. It's not touched. It's sterile.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's just one example, a tiny personal example of the waste in the NHS.
Just throwing money away, yeah. Look, we need to leave it there, you two. Thank you both very much indeed. We shall catch up with you, Nigel and Dawn, a little bit later on.
Right now, it is 10 minutes to 7. Let's bring you up to date with the other stories today. And we mentioned this in the papers. The Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace, has refuted claims from Moscow during a phone call with his Russian counterpart that Ukraine plans to use a bomb laced with radioactive material against them. Mr. Wallace has warned Russia not to try to use it as a pretext for his own efforts to step up the conflict.
4 Just Stop Oil activists have been arrested for willful obstruction after blocking traffic on London's Abbey Road. Yesterday, protesters recreated the pose on the cover of the Beatles' Abbey Road album at the crossing, stopping cars on both carriageways. I can tell you, as someone who drives up and down that road every morning, coming to work, that just happens anyway.
That is true.
Every time.
And you can watch it on a webcam to see people stopping. Let's talk about the roads, though. National Highways have announced £44 million worth of fleet of new gritters that can travel up to 50 miles per hour have been assembled as the country prepares for freezing conditions on motorways and A roads this winter. Well, the faster speed of the gritters means salt can be spread at a quicker pace, reducing delays on roads.
The NHS has launched its annual nationwide drive to recruit more nurses, trying to fill vacancies across England. The We Are the NHS campaign comes as staff are preparing for a challenging winter with flu, COVID and record nursing vacancies.
Now, we, the British holidaymaker, are being charged more than overseas customers on UK booking websites.
Now, weakness of the pound has meant that travellers have been asked to pay hundreds more than people in other European nations for the same trips.
What's going on? Well, joining us now is the CEO of the PC agency, Paul Charles. Thank you very much for joining us. Give me an example then. If I want to go on holiday, why am I being charged more than someone who's booking the same trip from, let's say, France or Spain?
What you're seeing in this currency maelstrom, this currency crisis at the moment, essentially is companies and airlines not able to keep up with the changing currency rates. So their different websites around the world are charging consumers differently based on where they are. So if I'm in France, for example, I'm probably going to get a much better rate to get a ferry or a flight across to the UK than if I was buying it in the UK to go the same journey. And so what we're seeing is better benefits for those who are based abroad.
We've seen this before, haven't we?
We have, absolutely. In fact, British Airways clamped down on it many years ago, say 10, 15 years ago. If I wanted to go to New York, it would be much cheaper for me, actually, based in Britain, to buy a ticket as if I was going from Paris to New York via London and simply get on in Heathrow and fly across to New York. And BA realised they were losing a fortune. They were losing millions of pounds from those who were taking advantage of this. And they clamped down on it by actually stopping their website selling you a ticket if you were based here but flying from France. So ever since then, others have cottoned on to this and are doing the same thing, not enabling you to buy easily if you're based in another country.
So does that mean are we being ripped off?
Well, we're not being ripped off as such. I think it's more that systems can't cope with the constantly changing exchange rate. So that's one of the reasons why you're seeing such a differentiation in prices. But also it's because, frankly, they know they can make more money if they're charging the British more without us complaining about it too much.
So what are we supposed to do when booking our holidays?
Well, my top tip, without doubt, is to find a friend or a family member who's abroad to book it for you. So if you've got somebody in France, for example, get them to go on their local version of the company's website and to choose the flight you want, get them to book it in your name, pay them back later by a bank transfer or credit card or whatever, and you'll get a cheaper deal. So that's what I often do. I'll get friends or family to book who are based in another country, and you'll get a much better rate. I did it the other day with a flight from the UK to New York. They booked it for me as if they were flying from UK to New York, but put my name in, it's perfectly legal, and I got a much better rate. So that's my top tip.
What sort of difference are we talking about then in your case? If you've just done it, you know what the figures are.
Absolutely. You can easily be looking at £200 or £300 savings.
Really?
So it is a big saving, especially if you're a family of 4 and you're going abroad for the summer next year. then you can get a really big saving, significant over £1,000.
Only thing that just makes me think about that plan is the admin if something goes wrong. And what if we just had a summer of flight cancellations, flights changing, and then if someone else has got the booking and they've made it, just the admin headache of unpicking it all if something goes wrong, presumably you'd say it's still worth it because the savings are going to be, you know, significant.
Absolutely, but the admin nightmare is from here as well. If you're booking from here, make sure you've got the right names on the booking, make sure your name matches your passport exactly, the name on there. Then there are fewer chances of it going wrong. Yes, there are issues, of course, when you're travelling and booking. Just make sure you're not doing it in a rush. Make sure you're taking your time so that you do get those details right.
Paul, great to see you. As
Nice to see
always, you've inspired me now to go and try and book a trip somewhere.
Go and do it.
Very
Let's
nice,
do
and
it.
book it in a different way.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, find all your friends who are currently elsewhere on the continent to do some research for you and see what holidays you could book.
I'll tell you what, well, I've got to go to... I've got to book a flight to Finland, right? But not till later on next year. But it's so expensive just to get there for various reasons. So I don't know, I'm gonna see if I can get someone in Spain to do it. There you go. We're talking about quiet quitting. Richard says, the company I have just retired from are responsible for practically all their staff becoming quiet quitters, working to time, in effect. They treated their staff so badly, so many left. As a result, they relied on keen staff to cover their work. But eventually, they just got worn down. So, which you can understand. Yeah, get worn down, get fed up with a lot of it, aren't you?
Hannah, I think lots of people who've quietly quit feel the same as you. She says, I know that feeling, unappreciated, underpaid. I work really hard for my job because I love what I do. My employer never acknowledged or seemed to see they'd even recognised it. Worked through lockdown in the front line and not even a thank you. I resigned. So that wasn't even quiet, because quiet quitting, if you're not used to the phrase, is just going to work and doing the bare minimum. But obviously, in Hannah's case, it got to the point where you say,
she loud
enough.
quitters.
No.
Yeah. Lovely. Keep your thoughts coming through to us, and we'll bring you the very latest on who's going into number 10 in a couple of minutes. And looking ahead to the weather, the UK is breezy and mild today with sunny spells and scattered locally heavy showers for most. Let's have a look at the details.
It's going to be breezy, especially around the coast of southwest England, but mainly dry with some bright or sunny spells. There's going to be some scattered, occasionally heavy showers likely, particularly in the west.
And mostly dry across London and the southeast with plenty of sunshine. Rather breezy, especially along the Channel coast where the odd shower is possible.
What about southern and western Wales? Well, scattered locally heavy showers. It's going to be interspersed with some sunny spells. It's rather windy, especially across the coast and the hills. It should feel quite mild, though.
A bit breezy, but mostly dry in the Midlands. Plenty of sunny spells for all. However, the odd shower possible, most likely towards the west.
Now, the east and northeast of England is going to be mostly dry with patchy cloud and sunny spells. The cloud could bring the odd shower. It's feeling nice and warm, though, again, particularly for this time of year.
Scattered, locally heavy showers affecting northern and western Scotland. There'll be some sunny spells, but a brisk wind too. Going to feel nice and warm, though, apparently, in the sunshine.
There's going to be a mix of sunny spells and scattered heavy showers across Northern Ireland. The showers most frequent there in the north and the west. It's going to be breezy, but feeling quite mild.
So scattered, locally heavy showers continuing, especially in the west of the UK. Drier and brighter across the east. That's your weather today.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB Newsday with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB Newsday and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Rishi Sunak leads the race for number 10 after Boris Johnson drops out of the contest.
Good morning to you. It's 7 o'clock. It's Monday, the 24th of October. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Rosie.
Right, well, here's what's leading the news this morning. The former Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, looks like he's going to become Britain's next Prime Minister after Boris Johnson withdrew from the leadership race late last night. Now, in a statement, the former Prime Minister said now was not the right time for him to return.
The other leadership candidate, Penny Mordaunt, is of course facing pressure to drop out, allowing Mr Sunak to become PM without the decision being put to party membership, though she's got nowhere near enough votes to even get on the ballot at this stage.
In other news, 999 emergency call handlers are going to walk out today as BT and Openreach workers stage strike action again in a dispute over pay. We'll be live from the picket line.
And planning is underway for the biggest royal tour in world history, according to Palace insiders. King Charles attempting to shore up support for the monarchy amongst Commonwealth nations.
Please do get in touch with us in the usual ways, you know the drill. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Particularly, what do you make of, we've been discussing quiet quitting this morning, and of course, who our potential Prime Minister might be, Rishi Sunak.
Well, our main news this morning then, and Boris Johnson has ruled himself out of the Conservative leadership election. In a statement, he said, "I believe I have much more to offer, but I'm afraid that this is simply not the right time."
Well, that has cleared quite a large path for Rishi Sunak to become the next leader of the Conservatives and then, of course, the Prime Minister. Penny Mordaunt is quite far from the 100 nominations needed to proceed to the next round, but there's a lot more movement to come today.
Well, there is. Well, I'll tell you what, let's get the view of the Labour Party on this, should we, to begin with, which could be interesting. The Shadow Attorney General, Emily Thornberry, joins us now. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Nice to see you. Presumably, you would welcome, would you, the opportunity for this country to have some stability, particularly fiscal stability, over the next few months?
What we would welcome is for the public to have a say in what should happen in relation to this crisis. You know, we've had how many prime ministers will we have had just in a few weeks, with the public having absolutely no say at all? And 70% of them, according to polling, want to have that say. So why are the Conservatives not letting them? Why are they stitching it up amongst themselves? And why are they so arrogant as to believe that their so-called solutions are the solutions to the mess that they've created in the first place?
Well, there wasn't
Forgive me. Leaving the, yeah.
There wasn't a general election when Tony Blair left and Gordon Brown took over.
Well, when Tony Blair stood for election in 2005, I did as well, and I well remember what happened. The Conservatives used to say, oh, vote for Tony Blair and get Gordon Brown, and we used to say, yeah, absolutely. The guys are joined at the hip, and he was Chancellor. Remember the last election in 2019, Rishi Sunak wasn't even on the pitch. Nobody knew anything about him. He was a complete unknown. And since then, so much has happened that the public, and that's really what matters, the public want to have a say. And, you know, you can now, I'm sure you'll tell me, oh, well, you know, we're in the middle of a crisis. We can't afford to have 6 weeks of faffing around with an election. Well, that's how long it took for Liz Truss to come into office, mess up the whole of our economy, and then disappear again. We could have had a general election then.
We all know a general election is highly unlikely in the near future. They will want to sort of capitalise on a little bit of stability and try and make some progress. That leaves you, the opposition, with opportunity to have that time to persuade the public that you are the credible option. How are you going to use this time?
So can I just say one last thing, and I will answer that question. But with Boris Johnson leaving the contest now, they have now lost their very last argument for why it is that they shouldn't have a general election. I mean, I do dispute that we should even just kind of sit back and accept that there shouldn't be an election. You know, people supporting Boris Johnson said he's the only person who we can have because otherwise we need to have a general election because he's the only one with the democratic mandate. Well, for once, I agree with Conservative MPs, and that's about a third of them. So, if we don't get a general election, which we should, then obviously our job as the opposition is to make it clear that it doesn't have to be this way. There is an alternative to this, and we have short-term solutions and long-term plans for the economy, which quite frankly have been where we have sat and we have listened to the public and we have learned from them, and our policies are aligned with what it is that they need. So in the short term, we would have a windfall tax on the energy companies that are making such huge profits at the moment because the prices are so high. We would then use that money to make sure that bills were kept low. You know, the government at the moment has got a policy where they're going to keep the bills low for a bit, but they're not going to take any of the money away from the energy companies that are making so much money. Remember, these are energy companies where the chief executives say that the current crisis is like a cash machine for them, and you know. So we would have proper taxes, we would make sure that that was supporting the public, and then there wouldn't be the billions of pounds additional borrowing that this government are pushing us into. We would have long-term plans for the future. We would make sure that we were investing in Great British Energy. We would make sure that we were moving towards clean power so that we weren't subject to the whims of someone like Putin. We would be able to stand on our own 2 feet. We would have new jobs. We would be able to keep bills low, and the profits that were made would be able to go back into British pockets.
Well, look, it's a good outline. Sounds very good on the surface, and I know it's unusual, but we're going to have Labour as an opposition, aren't we? If you're going to be constantly pushing for a general election, we're going to have to start seeing the detail of all that. We're going to have to start seeing the small print of all that sometime soon, aren't we? So at least should there be a snap election, we know what you're offering.
Well, I think that what we should be doing is we should be showing the direction of travel. We should be showing, you know, what our principles are, how we would do this, how we would make sure that we prioritised sound money, looking after the public finances, being a reliable alternative, being a government that people could believe in. You know, these are really important principles that we would make sure that we put into practice. But when it comes to the fine detail, it's quite difficult for us at the moment because, quite frankly, you know, the Office for Budget Responsibility, who is an independent body that's supposed to audit, supposed to look at what the state of our economy is, hasn't been allowed to publish anything. You know, we won't know until next week just how bad things are. And when we know how bad things are, then it will be easier for us to be able to give more detailed plans. But at the moment, can I just put this on its head? You know, we don't have the OBR forecast. We haven't done for weeks, despite all of this terrible crisis. We don't know how bad it is. And today, you also have potentially the Prime Minister being not elected, right? Not elected by MPs or even by their members, let alone by the country, just simply swanning into office, and he isn't even doing a media round as I am in order to make sure that it is clear to people what it is that he stands for or what it is that he's going to do to this country. So, I mean, with respect, I would say, of course the opposition are under a duty to give you some detail, but you should be, demanding to hear from what is the putative Prime Minister as to what it is that he's going to do.
Well, not yet Prime Minister, and he did go through 6 gruelling weeks of laying out to the public and the party membership what his plans were.
Changed since
so
then.
we've got an idea of what Rishi Sunak wants to do with the economy.
He put forward 6 weeks ago.
Which bits of Rishi Sunak's plan do you think aren't a good strategy?
No, don't even ask me that. I don't even know what Rishi Sunak's plan is. He may have been saying things in the summer, but frankly, he changed them as the summer went on. He started off with quite strong accusations against Liz Truss, but by the end of the summer, he was putting forward all of his ideas when it comes to cutting taxes. And then since then, we've had this kamikaze budget, and the markets have crashed, and they've crashed our economy. I don't know what Rishi Sunak is going to do to get us out of that mess, and yet by the end of the day, he's going to be Prime Minister. I mean, what kind of democracy are we living in?
Well, I'll tell you what, Emily Thornberry, if we could strong-arm Rishi Sunak onto the programme, we would absolutely love to do so, but he hasn't put himself forward.
Well, work on it. That's all
we'll
I'm
work
saying.
on it.
Just work on it.
We're very glad you're doing the rounds this morning. Good to talk to you. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you. All right, OK, bye-bye.
Well, let's tease out some more of the detail. Joining us in the studio is the Deputy Digital Political Editor of the Daily Express, Dan Faveley, and also our political correspondent, Tom Harwood. Dan, we'll come to you in a second. Tom, look, the main thing that Emily Thornberry wants to make clear is that Labour want a general election. We're going to hear that. And Emily was saying there, what strategies might we use to engineer that? Is that really going to be possible?
Well, in terms of how you get a general election, really it's in the gift of Parliament, or indeed the executive. Since the repeal of the Fixed-Term Parliament Act, this is a royal prerogative power, as they know, that reverts to the Prime Minister. So the Prime Minister could call a general election, or a majority of parliamentarians could call a general election were they to vote no confidence in the government. Now, given that there's quite a large Conservative majority in Parliament, even though sometimes it doesn't feel like it, it's unlikely that we're going to get a general election any time soon. You'd need Conservative MPs voting against their own interest, which would be a very peculiar thing to do. So the opposition will demand a general election, just as the Conservatives demanded a general election in 2007 when Gordon Brown got in. It's sort of what oppositions have to do at this time. But ultimately, it's very unlikely.
Can I ask you then, Tom, why are they going on about it so much? It might be a valid argument. There'll be lots of people saying, well, it's a valid argument, but if they absolutely know it ain't going to happen, why talk about that and nothing else? Is it just undermining the incoming executive?
That's certainly part of it, yeah. They want to try and emphasise that this is a new government. One of the incredible tricks, I suppose, of swapping out a leader is that sometimes you can sort of refresh and everything. This is a way, I suppose, of undermining that and also saying that we are ready for government. The Labour Party has often been accused of not being ready for government. They're trying to present themselves as a government in waiting. This is also a way to do it. But it is funny because people on the opposition front bench from the 2017 to the 2019 Parliament emphasised that we live in a representative democracy, that Parliament takes primacy, that votes of the public happen at the times of general elections, but MPs can sort of make up their minds in between. We heard that was the Labour argument to do with a second referendum over Brexit, for example. Ignore the referendum because parliamentarians have primacy. Now it seems like they're doing precisely the opposite thing, saying, well, actually, this is a democracy of the people. Parliamentarians shouldn't choose things. We should have a general election. It's funny how different parties sort of swap their arguments depending on the times we're in.
Dan, in all of this, we are looking at whatever the Labour Party wants to do with a new Prime Minister. We're getting a new Prime Minister, and it's going to be, let's be perfectly clear, it is going to be Rishi Sunak, isn't it?
It looks incredibly likely.
Come on.
There is that slim outside
You've got to hedge
chance.
your bets a little bit with what's happened over the last 6 weeks.
Absolutely. I mean, hey, there was no chance in the summer I would have been saying to you that Liz Truss would have resigned by now and that we'll be going through another leadership election. There is that outside chance that having Boris Johnson pulled out last night, that some of his supporters may say, you know what, I'm going to back Penny Mordaunt. And that might be because they don't want Rishi Sunak to be Prime Minister, or there are those making the argument that, quite frankly, it can't be just down to MPs who the next leader is, and it should go to Conservative Party members in order for them to get a vote. And for that to happen, you need a second candidate. So it is likely Rishi Sunak, but there is just that outside hope.
How much of a problem is it for Rishi Sunak that he couldn't generate the support from party members the first time round?
I think there are a lot of party members who will be rather angry that we're going through this and that potentially he could end up without a members' vote or that they have to reject him again. When you go to a members' vote, for you to say, actually, we want Liz Truss, we back her vision, and then to be told, quite frankly, 7 weeks later, no, we're going to give the other guy a chance, what's the point of going to the members in the first place?
Yeah, but that's because it didn't work, isn't it? I mean, but I suppose that there is an argument, and it's a solid argument, and members may not like it, but if members elect a leader of a political party who doesn't command the majority of his parliamentary members, it doesn't work. So we've seen it with Liz Truss, we saw it with Jeremy Corbyn, we saw it with Ed Miliband.
Yeah, and that is very true, and that is kind of what Rishi Sunak is placing a lot of this on. It's what he did a lot of when he was touring the country during the first leadership election. He was saying to members, look, I had the most backing from MPs, I can unite our party, and now unity in the Tory party is needed more than ever.
Yeah. Can I just ask finally, because the argument made from lots of people who are supporting Boris Johnson giving this a second shot was that, and Emily Thornberry mentioned it herself, they can't then say, well, you don't have the mandate, because it was the public that voted for Boris Johnson. Why do you think he said, not now?
Well, I just want to pick up on 2 points on that. Emily Thornberry said Boris Johnson had the mandate. Rishi Sunak wasn't even heard of at the last election. Actually, in a lot of the TV debates, Rishi Sunak was put up as the man to do it. He was a bit of an unknown, but he was the public-facing figure for the Conservative Party in TV debates. In terms of why Rishi Sunak thinks he can do it without an election right now, quite frankly, he'll be putting forward the argument of economic stability. Right now, that the markets need to be calmed, we need to have some sensible leadership, and they can't now go through the turbulence of a general election.
OK. Dan and Tom, thank you both very much indeed, and Tom, will catch up with you a little bit later on. Oh, interesting times, isn't it?
And
very interesting
the
times.
time that's very important today is 2 o'clock. That's when we'll have much more clarity. Stephen is pretty much saying it's a done deal.
It's a done deal. It is a done deal.
I just think so many crazy things have happened that if Penny Mordaunt could, it's not impossible, she could capitalise that
votes.
support. She does, but there's a lot of votes as well of people who apparently put their weight behind Boris Johnson but never did so publicly. So who are those people? How are they feeling now, and who are they going to support?
Chris says there is no specification for a job as MP. I don't know if he means PM. Well, either of them, to be fair. Perhaps if we set some minimum standards, we may get better quality MPs. Qualifications, skills, experience, a standard form for all prospective candidates could provide voters with more information than the party leaflets that tell us nothing. And Talfin. Oh, Talfin, we heard from you the other day. We were talking about unusual names. A complete stitch-up by Tory MPs to bypass the membership voting, which was predicted on Twitter days ago. Yeah, keep your thoughts coming through. GBviews at gbnews.uk.
Right now, 17 minutes past 7. Let's give you sort of a whistle-stop tour of the other things that are happening today. And the Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace, has refuted claims from Moscow during a phone call with his Russian counterparts that Ukraine plans to use a dirty bomb against them. Now, Mr. Wallace has warned Russia not to try to use it as a pretext for their own efforts to step up the conflict.
Just Stop Oil activists, 4 of them at least, have been arrested for willful obstruction after blocking traffic on London's Abbey Road, pretending to the Beatles, as you can see, doing that pose from the famous album cover, stopping cars, or attempting to, heading in both directions.
Well, National Highways have announced a £44 million fleet of new gritters that can travel up to 50 miles per hour. Well, it's been assembled as the country prepares for freezing conditions on motorways and A roads this winter. Well, these new, faster speed gritters means salt can be spread at a quicker pace, obviously, reducing, hopefully, delays on roads.
Hate to sound like a geek, but unless that thing at the back spins faster as well, you're going to get less grit per square inch on the roads, aren't you?
It's a sorry day when the speed of a gritter is our best story. That's
it's our
positive story.
It's our most fun story today. Yeah, I mean, honestly.
For a Monday.
If you are getting out on the roads today, be careful. There's loads and loads of surface water, which, so you can Oh, what do they call it when you go through the water and lose traction? You know.
Let us know. It's not on my mind.
I'm on day 4 of getting up very early, and my brain,
true.
I have got brain fog at the minute.
Now to a story where I've stood on these picket lines reporting on them before, and they're not going away. We know we've got a winter of strikes to come, but today it's 999 call handlers who, for the second time, joined over 40,000 other telecom staff on picket lines in the latest industrial action against their employers, who are BT.
In what's becoming a long and bitter dispute, BT has described the actions of the CWU as reckless.
Well, let's go to a picket line. Our East Midlands reporter Will Holmes is in Nottingham for us. Will, just explain to us, why this dispute still isn't being settled.
Yes, well, you start to lose track a little bit, don't you, Rosie? Because this has been going on for such a long time now. This is going to be the 8th day of strikes for BT and telecom workers, people that work for Openreach as engineers, which is obviously quite important because Openreach mans all of the communication lines. So no matter how you might be calling somebody, you need an Openreach worker to make sure that is an open line and that it's all connected. What makes this one a little bit different, and as you quite rightly said, you've already seen a little bit about it from recent strikes, is because this one includes 999 call handlers. Now, until quite recently, the Communication Workers Union, which is representing the members of BT and Openreach, said that they weren't going to use people from the 999 call handlers, but because they say that BT is refusing to come back to the negotiation table, it's what they've had to do. They've had to escalate it to this level. Of course, BT has described that action as being quite reckless. When it goes back to the core details of this, it's to do with pay and conditions. We've got a background of the cost of living crisis, really high rates of inflation that are around 10%. So the Communication Workers Union says a £1,500 imposed pay rise, so not a negotiated pay rise, from their opinion, isn't enough for their members. BT said, of course, it's a reckless action, but anything to do with the 999 call handlers, they will do whatever part of BT Group operations. They cite things like when there's a special event to do with, for example, the Queen's funeral or Christmas. Andy Kerr, who's the Communication Workers Union's Deputy General Secretary, I'm sure you'll see him all over the TV and radio today, has said, in relation to this strike, you've got them on the ropes, let's keep them there and we will win the pay rise you have earned. So that indicates that while right now there are no more strikes allotted, you need a two-week period. If you are going to do one of these strikes, you have to notify the company and notify the government that you're going to be doing a strike. While there is no more strikes booked in right now, it proves that they aren't going to be going away anywhere, especially when the Communication Workers Union thinks that it is working, that their plan is working. They're hoping to get BT around the table. They've not had it quite yet, though. But the Communication Workers Union are going to be on a picket line just over there. You can see that they aren't here yet. We've been told that they're going to be here really soon.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed. Well, you're going to have to be there waiting with cups of tea for them so you can persuade them to give you an interview a little bit later on. You can tell how wet it is out there, just the noise of the traffic on the roads. It's all that's all the water.
Miserable, and that does really test the strength of a picket line if you're prepared to come out in that weather. And who will have to persuade to speak to them, having stood there and done exactly that job before, is not the people striking, but it's BT. So we'll see how that develops. We'll be checking in with Will across the morning, because those are the people really who are, they have in the past, my experience, been much more reluctant to come forward and speak.
Yes. Now, don't go anywhere, because it's 7:23, and in 7:25 we'll have all the big sports stories for you with Paul Coyte. And looking ahead to the weather, the UK is breezy and mild today with sunny spells and scattered locally heavy showers for most. Let's have a look at the details.
It's going to be breezy, especially around the coast of southwest England, but mainly dry with some bright or sunny spells. There's going to be some scattered, occasionally heavy showers likely, particularly in the west.
And mostly dry across London and the southeast with plenty of sunshine. Rather breezy, especially along the Channel coast where the odd shower is possible.
What about southern and western Wales? Well, scattered locally heavy showers. It's going to be interspersed with some sunny spells. It's rather windy, especially across the coast and the hills. It should feel quite mild, though.
A bit breezy, but mostly dry in the Midlands. Plenty of sunny spells for all. However, the odd shower possible, most likely towards the west.
Now, the east and northeast of England is going to be mostly dry with patchy cloud and sunny spells. The cloud could bring the odd shower. It's feeling nice and warm, though, again, particularly for this time of year.
Scattered, locally heavy showers affecting northern and western Scotland. There'll be some sunny spells, but a brisk wind too. Going to feel nice and warm, though, apparently, in the sunshine.
There's going to be a mix of sunny spells and scattered heavy showers across Northern Ireland. The showers most frequent there in the north and the west. It's going to be breezy, but feeling quite mild.
So scattered, locally heavy showers continuing, especially in the west of the UK. Drier and brighter across the east. That's your weather today.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other pay-per-review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back. It's coming up to 27 minutes past 7. Still to come here on Breakfast. In 7:45, with Black Friday approaching, the consumer expert Kate Hardcastle is telling us how you can spot the real deal from the fake ones, particularly if you're trying to cut back this Christmas.
Yes, you need a good Christmas bargain and not be ripped off. The King is reportedly planning the biggest royal tour in world history to shore up global support for the monarchy. We'll get the details at 8:15.
And please do keep getting in touch, whether it's about quiet quitting. People have been very helpful. It's aquaplaning. That's the word we were looking for earlier.
Oh, yes.
So if we've forgotten something as well, please do get in touch. And what do you make of our new potential Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak? Well, no.
He's there. He's in.
Penny Mordaunt could just do it. I'm not saying I want that to happen. I'm just saying there is an outside chance. But GBViews at gbnews.uk is the way you can get in touch, or you can tweet us too at GBNews.
Put your money where your mouth is, I think, on this, and just, it'd be a miracle if he does it. I'm not saying particularly we want Rishi Sunak as Prime Minister. As I was saying yesterday, I have no idea what I would do if I was in a decision-making place with all this sort of thing. Just don't know. However, he's got it. It's his now.
2 o'clock is the time that's important, so stay with us here on GB News today, because we'll take you through the political ups and downs of the day, and I'm sure many more to come. Right now, though, let's turn our attention to sport. Paul Coit joins us in the studio. Paul,
good morning.
Very good morning.
Stephen, have you ruled yourself out then? You've ruled yourself out of this.
What,
we're not making
leadership?
Yeah, we said about not making the decisions. Is this your way of saying you're out?
I'm out.
OK.
Definitely out. I apologise for all those who wanted to be. But I couldn't make a decision on this.
Right, OK.
When you look at it all, and we hear from all sides on the views, everything,
I thought you were a very decisive character.
I am normally, but with this, I'm just like...
OK. There you go.
I don't know. Just enough. Now, let's talk
bit
football.
like the sport, yes.
Yes, but I know all about my Spurs,
I know you do.
my Magpies and my Bees and all the rest of it.
Yes.
Now, tell me about...
Yes.
The football
the
you want to
games
talk
yesterday.
about.
We'll talk about the Bees and we'll talk about the Magpies.
Stephen?
Well, the Magpies beat the Spurs yesterday, which was not very good for me, I've got to be honest, but it was Newcastle, the resurgent Newcastle, of course, now with the new owners, and you've got new players. They've signed so many different players coming in. And Eddie Howe, who's now the manager, people were thinking, is he the right guy to take over? But it's a very... Well, I say it's slow. They're taking their time on what they're doing, and they're winning, and they're doing very well, and then now edging up towards European places. There's obviously a lot of money there, but Spurs weren't great again. But it was pouring with rain. I had to go out on the pitch at half-time.
Did you?
It was the moment
hard work being a
that
celebrity,
deluge.
isn't it?
It was honestly, especially when it's raining.
You're singing the national anthem?
I didn't quite. I didn't quite do that one. But the rain came down, and it was just like one of these old-fashioned games. Talk about aquaplaning. The players were aquaplaning, but a bad result for Spurs, but very good for Newcastle, who were terrific. So 2-1 win for them. Aston Villa. So as you would know, Steven Gerrard was the manager of Aston Villa, and then got fired. They were doing badly. So then Aston Villa play the Bees, Brentford, and they win 4-0. So what do you think that says? Does that say we're so much happier now, the shackles are off, you know, we've got rid of Steven Gerrard, now we can start playing? You'd kind of think so, wouldn't you?
You wonder, don't you? To be fair, it's quite a turnaround.
It really is a turnaround.
How's Alexander Mitrovic been getting on?
Well, he's doing absolutely fine because Fulham beat Leeds 3-2 yesterday, and Leeds, I mean, it's more about...
How's he getting on, Stephen?
No, you're laughing for. She doesn't appreciate Mitrovic.
I don't think she does the way that you do.
He's quite a good shooter, isn't he?
You were so close.
You're doing so well for a
what do you
second.
call
He
him?
just throw.
Striker.
Striker. Shooter. You know the guy who kicks the ball in the goals? That's him.
That's him.
That's the fella. But it's about Leeds, really, because Leeds are not doing well. Jesse Marsh, American coach, has come in, the American manager, and turned them around at the end of the season, but he's not going well, so I'm kind of wondering whether he's going to be the next one to go. But Leeds not looking good, but Mitrovic...
it's very good.
Any more questions
very
you've got,
good.
Stephen, on any other sporting matches over the weekend?
Well, I was just wondering how the Gunners did.
Actually, Rosie, do you have any questions for me?
Is there anything?
It's all very well knocking him there and heckling in the background. Have you ever been heckled doing
the
a
World
show?
Cup? Because, look, I don't follow football hugely, but I'm a massive fair weather fan, and when it comes to a big international tournament, whether it's the Euros, I was in Trafalgar Square when the Lionesses won, and I went absolutely mad and lost my head and had to sort of report to GB News without screaming. But the World Cup, if you're a fan like me and you thought, I want to go and support England or Wales, it is going to cost a serious sum of money.
Of course it is. I mean, we're talking at least £5,000, but you've got the flights, you've got the tickets. I mean, people are working this out, and it's the Supporters Association. But, I mean, to be honest with you, it doesn't matter where the World Cup is. It's always going to cost a lot of money.
But this has been branded the most expensive World Cup
They are calling it the
ever.
most expensive World Cup, but I'm looking at it and thinking, well... Is it really the case? If you're going to fly anywhere in the world, yes, it's going to cost you £1,000 return to get there. But if it was held anywhere else, maybe outside of Europe, it's going to cost that sort of money. The prices for hotels is still going to be expensive. That hasn't changed. The tickets are more expensive. If you want to go to the final, and to be honest with you, if you're an England fan, I wouldn't be booking tickets for the final. But you never know. You never know. £1,200 they're talking for a ticket to go to the World Cup final. So it is going to be very expensive, yes. But is any other World Cup going to be expensive? I think, yes, it is. But there's a lot of people that are going out there, or a lot of people that actually aren't going, that do have tickets. England supporters are thinking, well, this is great, but what else do we do while we're there?
It's restrictive, isn't it?
It's pretty restrictive. You know, it's like, well, it's great to go for 90 minutes and enjoy the game, and maybe if there's a fan part, but apart from that, if you're going over there for 3 weeks, there's not really too much to do. So,
and if you want to watch it here, we were hearing earlier in the papers, lots of pubs have decided it's too expensive to open up, and you just expect that this winter, this is actually a brilliant time for pubs because they'll be able to show this game as well, this tournament.
Of course, and it is a strange time for the World Cup because we've never had a World Cup at this time. We've got the Premier League will end at the end of November, and then there's a month off. But I don't know about you, but even as a huge sports fan, because the Premier League's on at the moment, there isn't that big excitement about the World Cup because usually the season would end, then we'd have maybe 3 weeks or so, and then the build-up would begin. But because it's only 3-4 weeks away, and there's so much sport on as it is at the moment, it's going to hit us. And then it's like, what, the World Cup is on now? So hopefully that momentum will build once England start playing.
I'm sure.
And Wales, of course.
I mean, it's like you, Paul. I hadn't really thought about it.
Have you now, Ray?
No.
But now it's in there. Now it's in there, I should say. But there's loads of World Cups on at the moment. We've got Cricket World Cup. We've got the Rugby League World Cup, which is also on at the moment. And I should mention, though, that the coach, this is an interesting one, the Rugby League World Cup, which is being held here, and England stand a great chance. They've only ever been runners-up. But Lebanon are one of the big sides in the Rugby League World Cup. Now, Lebanon is pretty much full of Australians. Try and work this out. And the coach of Lebanon is one of the great Australian rugby union coaches. I feel like I'm doing an episode of 3-2-1 here. But Michael Checker, his name is. Now, Michael Checker won the World Cup with Australia in rugby union. He's now the rugby union coach of Argentina and the rugby league coach, there he is, Michael, and the rugby league coach of Lebanon. Now, if Lebanon get to the quarterfinals of the World Cup...
He'll have to play himself.
Well, no, Argentina are playing England that same weekend. So he's going to have to do rugby union against England and the... You know what, I've confused myself. Even Michael Checker doesn't know what he's doing, but there you go.
Very confusing.
Paul, thank you.
Get off.
Thank you.
Right, now 7:35. After the break, we're going to be going through the papers again with Dawn and Nigel. Don't go anywhere.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB Newsday with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB Newsday and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Well, a very good morning. 7:37. Welcome back to Breakfast. Let's go through the papers again. Joining us this morning, back in the studio, Dawn Neeson and Nigel Nelson. Now, there's no surprise the front pages all pretty much have got the same story. And Dawn, let's delve into that. Rishi upon a star in the Sun.
See what they did with that headline there. Well, it looks like Rishi Sunak is going to be our new Prime Minister, potentially within the next few hours. And they have done... The Sun's done an interesting piece because they've analysed the campaign that he did when he was running against Liz Truss, it seems like just a few minutes ago, doesn't it? It went on for weeks. That campaign, to how he's handling the campaign now. And he was very, if you remember, he was very slick, wasn't he, Rose? Had all those it was almost like marketing videos. It's like
it was too slick.
It was too slick, and that is the problem. So people went off him because of that, because it was almost like I'm Rishi by me. And now it's much more simple, and I'm Rishi, I mean business. It's kept it very low-key, a very simple message saying I am actually going to sort things out, and sort of like simple statements rather than all those marketing videos. He went back into his childhood, my mum, my dad, and
God,
it was like an advertising campaign.
Do you think he thought he'd get this second bite at the apple so soon? Because he's been pretty much silent the last few weeks, being very strategic, and it's all come round far faster than I think most of us thought it would happen.
You can't believe it. It's like that. What was it? Was it Dallas or Dynasty? I can't remember. Where you were asleep and then
it was
woke
Dallas.
Up and it's Dallas and somebody
Bobby Ewing, wasn't it?
Yeah, I never. Yeah.
Oh yes. I'm older than I look.
It's like suddenly it's like, what have we dreamt all this? Is it actually happening to politics in our country? But no, Rishi, his Twitter campaign, and you've got to remember, a lot of politics is now fought out on social media, which is completely wrong because it's governing the way people are thinking, and it's not what the real people are thinking out on the ground there. But Rishi's Twitter site has been very quiet. The only thing he's tweeted recently is condolences about the Queen. And there's been no political commentary, nothing. He hasn't bad-mouthed anyone, he hasn't said anything good about anyone. It's just been very, very quiet. Now, obviously, with Rishi, you've got all the stuff in the background that sort of like probably didn't help him last time about his wife and being a non-dom and not paying taxes and him still having the green card, all of which has been sorted out now. So he's cleaned out all the skeletons in his wardrobe, well, as far as we know. It's a very business-like campaign. He's really, really taking this seriously.
Oh, so he should. There's no more ready for Rishi.
No, exactly. No, I mean,
nonsense.
In a few hours he'll be Prime Minister and he's got a lot on his plate.
Yeah. Meanwhile, the Mail reckons the Conservatives are having a midlife crisis, Nigel.
This is Grant Shapps writing in the Mail.
Oh.
Grant Shapps, who actually has gone through so many different sort of incarnations that he's been a loyal Boris acolyte. He was then a rebel against Liz Truss. He then became a cabinet minister under Liz Truss, and now he's a complete Rishi supporter. In fact, we even used to do, years ago, we used to do paper reviews together. So,
yeah.
So I remember Grant quite well. Anyway, what he's saying now is that it is a midlife crisis, as if the Tories were sort of an ageing businessman going out to buy a Maserati to go and attract young ladies. And he's also having a go
like
at
you
his
know
old...
a lot about a midlife crisis here, Nigel.
I'm sorry?
You sound like you know a lot about a midlife crisis here.
Oh.
I'm planning to have one at some stage, but not yet.
Well, when you get old enough.
I should let you know. Anyway, he also has a swipe at Liz Truss by saying that her mini budget was rather like a teenager being let loose with their parents' credit card. And what he's going on to say is, look, this is
happy enough to take a job offer.
Well, exactly. There's certain hypocrisy about all this. But what he does say is, and I think this is the sort of serious point, is the grown-ups have now taken over, and that probably is about right. You do feel that if Jeremy Hunt stays in place as Chancellor, Rishi Sunak becomes Prime Minister, you probably do have some grown-ups. But he does make the point that the Tories are at the moment drinking the last chance saloon.
Well, at least they're admitting it, because they're not going to get anywhere unless they admit just how bad the situation is for them.
Well, should we look at the opposition, Dawn? And we heard from Emily Thornberry earlier, and they're making very clear what they want, criticism of the party and also a general election. But in the Times, the perspective here is Keir Starmer taking lessons from Tony Blair.
I've picked this one because obviously everyone is very much rightly focused on our new Prime Minister, but Labour are actually, we talked about Rishi taking things much more seriously now. Labour are also taking things incredibly seriously. Evidently, the shadow cabinet are being given a masterclass in how to govern, and this consists of bespoke 90-minute training sessions for the likes of Angela Rayner, Rachel Reeves, Yvette Cooper, in how to run the country. basically. And it's interesting, isn't it? You'd have thought they might have done this slightly before now, but in any case, they haven't, obviously. And Keir Starmer himself is being given lessons in how to be a PM by Tony Blair and Gordon Brown. I'm not sure if people would find that reassuring or not, but that's what's happening. And Keir Starmer is also actually up the ante with meeting business leaders to win over those people that were terrified by the spectre of Jeremy Corbyn in the Labour Party. But my favourite quote in this particular story, and you know I'd pick this one out, is from constitutional historian Lord Hennessy, who says, "A government is like sex. You don't know whether you're any good until you've tried it." And then it's all over in a very short
all right,
space
Dawn,
of
all right,
time. Sorry,
Dawn. She always has to cross the line, this woman. Behave yourself.
You can be lively, Stephen. Come on.
Oh, no. Can we look at stamps? Because I heard this on the radio on the way in, and I sort of panicked, because I buy stamps at the beginning of the year. But now we've got to get them used by January.
Yeah, we've got to get rid of them, basically, yes. What's happening is that the Royal Mail are bringing in barcoded stamps, and all your old stamps that you might have tucked away in a bottom drawer or something like that. You could have books of them. I know a book of first-class stamps is £11.90. So,
is it really?
Yeah, they're 95p each, and so on the basis of that, if you've got 2 or 3 books that you've forgotten about, that's actually quite a lot of money you've got stored there. Anyway, what you should do is you should get them in before the 31st of January. Christmas stamps will be the same as they normally are. But there's a certain question about what happens after the 31st. The Royal Mail is saying, oh, you should be able to come in and swap them, but we don't know for how long. If these were banknotes, you'd be able to go into a bank and say, look, I've got this pot here, and can you now change this money over? I think the Royal Mail ought to do that. They've got a lot of elderly people who've forgotten about postage stamps there, and it could be could mean a lot to them.
I was going to say, well, we'll get them all used up on Christmas cards. If you've got a few left over, use them up on the Christmas cards. But, of course, they probably won't get delivered because they're all on strike, aren't they?
There's always that problem too, yes.
So, I mean, you know, you do wonder.
You could probably use them to vote in the next Tory party leadership election at some point, which would be happening very soon.
A couple of weeks' time.
Exactly, yeah.
We said earlier we were looking for something a bit lighter. Doctor Who.
I found it.
Tell us more.
Now, don't give anything away, because was it on last night?
It was on last night.
Because I haven't seen it yet.
Oh, haven't you? Have you taped it, or whatever the modern parlance is?
No, I stream. I shall stream it.
But there is going to be a return of one Doctor for a few episodes as well.
Do I do the story or not? I mean,
I
do you want to ruin it, Stephen? I mean,
ruin it.
So, sorry, everything's dictated by Stephen.
David Tennant's back, is he?
Oh, yeah.
Well,
so, in any case, most of the papers are covering this story. It was a 90-minute special last night, and I watched it. A huge fan of Doctor Who. John Pertwee was mine. And I watched 90 minutes of it, and it had Cybermen, it had Daleks, it had lots of explosions, it had TARDIS, and it had lots of the previous Doctors, which was brilliant, and previous assistants brought back. And I am completely and absolutely clueless as to what the plot was. I have no idea whatsoever.
Did you understand what happened?
No.
But did you still enjoy it just for the sort of spectacle?
I like the Daleks and the Cybermen, and there was one brilliant scene where there was a rah-rah Rasputin scene going on. Sorry, spoiler alert. And the Dalek and the Cybermen looked at each other, gave them that knowing look. And it was very clever lines. It was very funny. It's very worth watching. And if someone would like to explain what the hell happened, apart from David Tennant coming back at the end, then I'd be grateful.
I have to say, I think Jodie Whittaker and Chris Chibnall, the writer, have been a disaster.
It got a bit...
And I don't blame her. I don't blame her.
actress.
She's she can only work with what she's been given. It just hasn't worked as a project.
It got, for me, it got too complicated and as
too woke as well.
Too woke as well. I mean, it got very feminist, which I quite enjoyed up to a point. But it was like, I missed the chalk quarries in Kent where they used egg boxes for monsters.
Yeah. No, quite right.
Our next story sounds like it could have been from a Doctor Who plotline, Nigel, but NASA are going to launch their most determined alien hunt in world history spearheaded by a former astronaut.
That's
What's
right.
their plan?
Yes. This is actually quite serious stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know how you feel about UFOs, but from now on we've got to call them UAPs, which are unidentified aerial phenomena, apparently.
Yeah.
Anyway,
that isn't going to take on, is it?
Oh, Stephen.
US pilots have been seeing these things since 2004. They've had 144 sightings. They've been able to photograph them through their gun sights. And now a team has been set up, a team of 16, along with this astronaut Scott Kelly, who used to be on the International Space Station, to try and find out what is actually going on. So far, they seem to have ruled out this is actually some super technology from China or Russia, but no one knows what it is. And what the pilots describe is suddenly seeing these things, and then they just disappear. They go so fast that they...
and against aerodynamic principles.
And against that, exactly. And so what NASA want to do is try and get to the bottom of what these things are. Do we really have visitors from outer space, or is it something a bit more pedestrian that they can explain?
Yeah, I don't know. Exciting, though,
Isn't it? Just, yeah. I'd love to be in a project like that. It'd be fantastic.
I think it's absolutely brilliant, that. I don't know. I mean, it'd be even if it's not alien, it'll still be fascinating to know what can do that against all these principles with which we fly and all the rest of it, which these just ignore.
Yeah, and on the basis that these pilots, that they're trained, they know what they're doing, they know what they're seeing, that there is something extraordinary happening in front of their eyes.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Very, very good.
Watch this space.
Yeah, like that.
Oh, God.
Did you do that deliberately? Did you?
Can I say, there's some
It was
people who
better
say
than yours.
Terrible. That's terrible. Honestly. Thank you both. We'll catch up with you a little bit later on, possibly.
It is 10 minutes to 8. Let's bring you up to date with the other stories that are making the headlines today. And the Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace, has refuted claims from Moscow during a phone call with his Russian counterpart that Ukraine plans to use a dirty bomb against them. Now, Mr. Wallace has warned Russia not to try and use it as a pretext for its own efforts to step up the conflict.
BT and Openreach employees will strike today as part of a dispute over pay. Members of the Communication Workers Union, including 999 call handlers, will walk out for 24 hours. BT workers want a pay rise of £1,500 and will take further strike action if needed, according to the union.
New research shows house price growth in cities is outstripping increases in surrounding areas. This is research by Halifax. Their figures show property prices across Britain's cities have grown by over 9.2% since the start of this year. That's compared with just shy of 8% growth on average in surrounding areas.
How many sleeps till Christmas? Excuse me, I'm covered at the thought of spending the money. Not many. Well, as the festive season draws closer, we are going to have to think about how we can do Christmas a little bit cheaper this year.
Many shoppers will be looking at deal days, let's say Black Friday, to try and get a bargain. We know, though, don't we, that often these deals aren't all they seem. Let's find out more. Retail expert Kate Hardcastle joins us now for advice on all things Christmas shopping. Kate, very good morning. I sort of dread that we're already talking about this, but lots of people, particularly when cash is much more difficult and much tighter squeezed right now, will be looking earlier for deals to try and get Christmas presents. Where is it that we can go wrong and actually get stung?
Well, good morning to you both. Sorry to bring Christmas into your studio, but it's
No, I
important we
don't
talk
mind
about
it,
it. I think it's because retailers have had a pretty challenging time. They're going to be very much about promoting the message of spend. And we know people are shopping earlier than they ever have done before. Black Friday brought a discount period into the UK. It wasn't there before. This used to be peak period and peak profit. And now we're all looking for a bargain. But there is a psychology to it. So as soon as you start looking for a bargain and you start seeing deals and savings and red coloured pricing, brain goes into automatic mode of, wow, I'm doing really well with my budget. I'm doing well with my finances. And the old adage is still true. If you were never going to buy it anyway and you don't have the budget to buy it, it's not going to be a bargain. And I think it's all about knowing your budget, knowing the list of what you're buying, and avoiding getting drawn into a lot of those marketing messages.
Which is extremely difficult, especially online.
You are so right. And there are these triggers now. One of the ones my kids even feel affected by is the timing countdown. Have you seen
yes.
those?
Yeah.
Or limited stock, or only a couple left. And immediately even if you think in the front of your mind, I am avoiding it, the back of your mind's going, well, I'm not sure if I should just buy that because it might not be there. That's the panic mode. And I think even the price tracker websites, it's great to use them. So Camels are one of them, where you can basically go on and say, I'm looking at these items, keep a track for me. Really useful when it comes to things like Black Friday, because it will show you that most of the deals around Black Friday aren't actually a deal. It's cheaper other times a year. But even being subscribed to that can suddenly start, you think, oh, it's a really good price now, I'm going to buy it. And if you just don't have the budget, that's the challenge.
It used to be that you could go somewhere like John Lewis and you knew they had that low price promise. Big brands like that are saying we can't guarantee that anymore. So is there a retailer or a place that you'd go to where you feel more assured that you're not going to be cheated?
I think it's not. I don't think retailers cheat, because I will always ask them to stand up and be counted, but at the same time, they're there to make profit, they're there to make a sale. I think the fact is that the messaging's 24/7, isn't it? You go onto your social media, you feel like you're just going on to check on your work or see how your friends are, and straight away, the algorithms absorbed you into, well, I'm interested in this, I'm interested in that, and suddenly these promotions are there. And the retailers are doing that. So you think if it's a tried and trusted brand, why would I not buy it? I think it's about basically putting everything on lock. Don't save your cards details into your phone memory or into your computer. Make it hard work for you to have to input the details, so you are giving yourself the chance of a second thought and going, OK, I just need to breathe and think if this is the right thing to do.
I'll tell you what, shopper, because I get these messages on Instagram and Twitter where there's suddenly an advert for something, and I saw a sort of present for my nephew the other day and clicked and thought, that's perfect. So it was half price, reduced from £50 to £25, and when I searched it online elsewhere, I've actually bought exactly the same thing for £11.99.
Oh, Stephen, it's like you've listened to Yoda after all these years.
But it's true. You can't take anything at face value, can you?
You can't, and I think that's the thing. You are going to be your hero in all of this, knowing your budget. I mean, can I just say as well, it is not worth it for that January credit card bill. We know fuel costs are going up. We know how fearful it's going to be for so many families who end up in debt at that point. Why would we want to put ourselves in that situation? Set the budget, have the conversations within your family of what you're actually buying, what the expectation is, and then just enjoy the true merit of it. A great deal's always a great deal if you can afford it.
Yeah. Concentrate more on having a good family Christmas.
Do it. Yeah, do it. The odd treat's OK. I mean, obviously, I've got both of your presents.
Have you?
Yeah, of course I have.
Have you? Have you got all the ones for your kids yet? No.
We'll talk about that next week.
Well, Father Christmas is sorting those out anyway.
Christmas.
That's very
Stephen,
true.
not me.
Thank you
might
very
have to
much.
send one or two up to Father Christmas land.
Yeah.
There you go, Kate. Thank you very much indeed.
Right, don't go anywhere. We've got all the latest on the Conservative leadership election coming up after the weather.
And looking ahead to the weather, the UK is breezy and mild today with sunny spells and scattered locally heavy showers for most. Let's have a look at the details.
It's going to be breezy, especially around the coast of southwest England, but mainly dry with some bright or sunny spells. There's going to be some scattered, occasionally heavy showers likely, particularly in the west.
And mostly dry across London and the southeast with plenty of sunshine. Rather breezy, especially along the Channel coast where the odd shower is possible.
What about southern and western Wales? Well, scattered locally heavy showers. It's going to be interspersed with some sunny spells. It's rather windy, especially across the coast and the hills. It should feel quite mild, though.
A bit breezy, but mostly dry in the Midlands. Plenty of sunny spells for all. However, the odd shower possible, most likely towards the west.
Now, the east and northeast of England is going to be mostly dry with patchy cloud and sunny spells. The cloud could bring the odd shower. It's feeling nice and warm, though, again, particularly for this time of year.
Scattered locally heavy showers affecting northern and western Scotland. There'll be some sunny spells, but a brisk wind too. Going to feel nice and warm, though, apparently, in the sunshine.
There's going to be a mix of sunny spells and scattered heavy showers across Northern Ireland. The showers most frequent there in the north and the west. It's going to be breezy, but feeling quite mild.
So scattered, locally heavy showers continuing, especially in the west of the UK. Drier and brighter across the east. That's your weather today.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB Newsday with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB Newsday and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Rishi Sunak leads the race for number 10 after Boris Johnson pulls out.
Well, a very good morning. It's 8 o'clock on Monday, the 24th of October. This is Breakfast on GB News this morning with Stephen and Rosie.
Here's what's leading the news for you today. The former Chancellor Rishi Sunak looks almost certain to become Britain's next Prime Minister after Boris Johnson withdrew from the leadership race last night. In a statement, Mr Johnson said now was not the right time for him to return.
Well, the other leadership candidate, Penny Mordaunt, is now facing pressure to drop out, allowing Sunak to become Prime Minister without the decision having to be put to the party membership.
Emergency call workers will walk out today as BT and Openreach stage strike action in a dispute over pay. We're going to be live on a picket line.
And planning's underway for the biggest royal tour in world history, according to palace insiders, with King Charles attempting to shore up support for the monarchy among Commonwealth nations.
So many of you getting in touch about what is going on in Westminster. It's another day, it's another story, isn't it? It's absolutely unbelievable. But anyway, we'd love to hear from you. GB Views at gbnews.uk.
So Boris Johnson has ruled himself out of the Conservative leadership election. In a statement, he said, "I believe I have much to offer, but I'm afraid this is simply not the right time."
Now, it clears a path then, pretty much, for Rishi Sunak to become the next leader and Prime Minister. Penny Mordaunt, who's still officially in the race, hasn't got enough nominations yet to even get on the ballot paper.
So Sunak and Mordaunt need to submit their nominations by 2 o'clock today, with Tory members deciding the result if both candidates reach the threshold of 100. But lots of people anticipating that Penny won't. Well, the person who can actually give us the details, our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, is in Westminster for us. Darren, another turbulent 12 hours. Just talk us through it. Boris says, I'm no longer running. Why did he do that?
Well, frankly, Rosie, because he really couldn't guarantee that he was going to win. Let's be frank about that. The reason Boris Johnson issued that statement around 9 p.m. Last night is because there was a real possibility that simply he either wouldn't get on the ballot paper, or even if he did, that essentially he might not have won with the membership. He may have won by a very small margin, but he would have been in charge of a party that, frankly, largely did not want him as leader. Now, why do I say that? Is because Rishi Sunak is way out in the lead. It was clear as the weekend went on that the momentum was behind the former Chancellor. It was significant that people, particularly on the right of the party, like Steve Baker, like Kemi Badenoch, like Suella Braverman, who up until last week was the Home Secretary, had come out to bat for Rishi Sunak and not for the Prime Minister. Obviously, Boris Johnson had tried to strike deals with Rishi Sunak on Saturday and with Penny Mordaunt yesterday. Again, they said to him, sorry, former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, we're not prepared to do a deal with you. In fact, if anything, you should be rowing in behind us. And so I think Boris last night knew essentially the game was up. Whether that 102 figure is true or not, clearly his supporters argue it is true that he had 102 backers and could have got on the ballot paper, though we know only around, 60 had actually publicly declared.
Will
so what's
never...
going to happen today? Well, frankly, I think we're going to see probably a fast-moving day, if you like, in many regards, Rosie. The reason I say that is because I think almost certainly we're going to see Rishi Sunak as Prime Minister, and almost certainly by the end of play today. In fact, it may well happen at any point, including in the early afternoon. Penny Mordaunt is a long way behind. She's only got 25 publicly declared MPs backing her. She says she's determined to carry on to see whether she can get on the ballot or not. She's clearly trying to woo many of those Boris Johnson supporters, many of whom clearly are very, very keen to stop Rishi Sunak becoming Prime Minister. They may well be prepared to row in behind Penny Mordaunt to do that. A lot of people do not like the former Chancellor. They see him as someone who stabbed Boris Johnson in the back. But let's be frank about this. Again, lots of those supporters, Boris Johnson supporters, are actually coming out for Rishi Sunak. So Rishi Sunak is a long way in the lead, around 150 MPs when it comes to those that have declared publicly. I suspect either one of three things may well happen today. Either at some point this morning, Penny Mordaunt recognises the game is up and says that she's not going to put herself forward, and Rishi Sunak automatically becomes leader of the party. We get to 2 o'clock and it's very clear that Rishi Sunak has a very substantial lead and Penny Mordaunt hasn't got quite enough MPs to get on the ballot paper. Again, Rishi Sunak becomes leader. Or Penny Mordaunt does get on the ballot paper with barely scraping 100 MPs, but Rishi Sunak is so far under the lead that ultimately she has to concede. Would she push it to the membership? I think that is really, really unlikely. It's always possible. I think it is unlikely. i.e., at the moment, at just after 8 a.m. on this Monday morning, I would suggest that almost all the roads lead to Rishi Sunak becoming leader and Prime Minister of the United Kingdom today. Interestingly, we're told that King Charles will be in London this evening if it is necessary for him to carry out his constitutional duty of asking the new leader of the Conservative Party to be the country's new Prime Minister.
Darren, thank you. Well, let's go to Boris Johnson's constituency of Uxbridge. Our national reporter, Paul Hawkins. I mean, it's difficult. I mean, it's a bit of a marginal, isn't it? I wonder what people there are making of it all, Paul.
Yeah, people here a little bit surprised. The light has only just lifted this morning, so we've only just had a chance to talk to a couple of people. But, you know, Boris Johnson, if he had run, it would have been a very different contest from the one in 2019, given there are tight limits on public spending, and also you don't have the Jeremy Corbyn factor, and of course Brexit supposedly for some is done already. So very different campaign it would have been if he had run in that general election. We asked people how they were feeling this morning about their own MP Boris Johnson not running to be Prime Minister again.
I think it's a good idea.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Why is that? I thought he says he's a winner, he can win the next election.
I don't think so. It's not done anything for the Uxbridge constituency, so I don't see him.
Yeah. And what about the country, though?
I think maybe we should go for somebody else. Fresh start.
Right, OK. So potentially it could be Rishi Sunak who becomes Prime Minister this afternoon. What do you think about that?
I think give him a chance.
Yeah.
Like they give Liz Truss a chance. If he delivers, all good. If not, then somebody else will come.
Does he need to have a general election?
Definitely, and I think we need a fresh mandate.
Yeah.
Pretty happy.
Why?
Because he is a serial liar, basically.
Right, but
Yeah.
he says that he could win the next general election.
I think he should look at the polls before he was forced out a few months ago.
Right.
It was starting to tank, and obviously as Liz Truss has come in, it's continued to tank. But they got rid of him partly because it was no longer looking like Boris Johnson would win the next election.
Yeah, right. So you're saying that assertion that he's a winner is no longer true?
No, it was true back in 2019 for sure. But and I think he's lost any kind of mandate he ever had.
Yeah, so look, those are just two people, clearly not fans of Boris Johnson in his constituency this morning. There are many people who are fans of Boris Johnson who still think he's a winner, who blatantly think Rishi Sunak, they call him a backstabber because of his resignation when he was in cabinet, when he was running for Chancellor, and they will be very disappointed to hear that he is not running again for PM. So, yeah, just two people from here in the constituency, by no means a scientific survey, but that's what we found out so far this morning.
Well, thank you. Let's talk to the Deputy Editor of Conservative Home, Henry Hill, who's here in the studio. It's fascinating here because just to run through the names, so many people getting in touch. So here we go. Bob, Graham, Regina, Adam, Steve, Stephen, Pauline, John, Mark, Mary, Brian, Joseph and Pat. It's just what I've got to happen to have to hand. Say, this is a disaster. They will never vote Tory again.
So Boris Johnson has a very vocal group of supporters, both amongst Tory MPs and amongst the Conservative Party membership. We hear from them all the time, pretty much every time I do one of these shows. Some of them write to Conservative Home to complain about it. But I think the important thing that Tory MPs needed to remember, and that anyone who wants a Conservative government needed to remember, is that while that group is very vocal, they are a minority. You know, Boris Johnson's national polling was very poor. He did not command the confidence of his colleagues. You know, he left office because about 60 of them resigned because they didn't think they were unable to serve in his government. So the idea that he'd come back from that to win a general election, I don't think it was particularly plausible.
What is Rishi Sunak going to do first if he is Prime Minister, as we expect by the end of the day? It's not just the economy that he's got to deal with, and first and foremost, it's trying to unite a deeply fractured party.
It's going to be very difficult. I mean, what really unites the Conservative Party is strength. You know, if you're a strong leader with a clear mandate who's getting something done, the Tory MPs will normally row in behind you, whatever it is, right? You know, the Wets served with Margaret Thatcher. All those people who said they'd leave the party if Boris Johnson became Prime Minister, half of them ended up serving in one or other of his many cabinets. You know, it happens. But Rishi Sunak has a standing start. It's going to be really difficult for him. The most important thing he has to do in the first few weeks is Jeremy Hunt is currently cooking up the medium-term fiscal plan, which is what he used to calm the markets down. That's going to contain a very unpopular package of spending cuts / tax rises, and Rishi Sunak is going to have to get Tory MPs to vote that through.
But it's interesting, isn't it, that it's not going to be popular, no.
Nope.
However, there is this longing, isn't there? And I think for a lot of people, whether perhaps people who aren't members of the Conservative Party or even Conservative voters at the last election are just going to say, right, it's going to be difficult, it's going to be painful, but at least it feels like we are doing something.
That has to be Rishi Sunak's best hope, that after the chaos of the past few months, you know, it will be a very painful, spending cuts are never popular, tax rises are never popular, but if it calms the markets down, if it gets mortgages, you know, back down, if it solidifies pensions, then I think hopefully in 2024, when we'll probably have the next election, Rishi can go to voters and he can say, look, I know that it's not been the best few years, but on the things that really matter, the pounds and pence, the cost of living, I've looked after you.
Some of the papers have been talking about sort of this little bit of a gear shift from Rishi Sunak. 6 weeks ago, it was ready for Rishi. It was all very slick, too polished. he had 6 weeks to learn from the things that didn't really resonate with the public, and he might be in better shape now.
Yeah, I actually think Rishi Sunak's campaign has been really helped by the last few weeks, because now he's basically come in, he's got, you know, a few scars from the last battle, you know, his clothing's a bit ruffled, got a bit of dust on him, and he's like, look, I was right. You know.
But he hasn't really said that. He hasn't come out and go, I told you so.
No, he
We've all just come to that
he
conclusion.
hasn't had to, because it's been so obvious. You know, I think this is why I think people are underpricing the idea that he might have beaten Boris Johnson in a member round, because he can say to people, look, coming just off the back of losing to Liz Truss and everything that happened after Liz Truss, he could have said, the last thing we need is more instability. If Boris wins, you know, love him or loathe him, the markets are going to go absolutely haywire. So I think it has done something for his credibility that Liz Truss imploded so spectacularly just after beating him in that last contest.
Henry, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Keep your thoughts coming through on that, if you would. Whichever side of the fence you sit on, it looks like, I'm certain, frankly, that Rishi Sunak will be Prime Minister, if not by the end of today, by the end of the week. But let us know what you think. gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Right now, 13 minutes past 8. And 999 call handlers are again going on strike. They are joining 40,000 other telecom staff on picket lines in the latest industrial action against their employers, BT.
Now, it's becoming a long and bitter dispute, and BT has described the actions of the CWU as reckless.
Well, let's find out more. Our East Midlands reporter Will Hollis joins us now from a picket line in Nottingham. Will, just explain to us what's at the essence of this dispute. It's over pay, isn't it?
Yes, of course. It really does boil down to those key points. Pay and working conditions. Sometimes you can lose track because there are so many different strikes going on right now. But this is the Communication Workers Union strike, and this is particularly for BT and Openreach telecommunications. There's also Communication Workers Union, Royal Mail and Post Office strikes on at the moment, but this one is completely separate. This is day 8 of the strike, and to tell us a little bit more about it is Jonathan. Jonathan, we're on quite a busy road here. We've got a really big telecommunications tower here in Nottingham. How is this strike going at this point in what's becoming quite a bitter dispute?
Yeah, the strike's going well. The numbers of people that aren't going into work have held up remarkably strong. People are that fed up with the company and how they've dealt with the whole imposition of pay and everything that goes associated with that.
This is a different scale, though. This strike and the last couple of days of the strikes, this includes 999 call handlers rather than just regular BT phone operators or Openreach, which is obviously quite an important role because they man all the infrastructure. But this includes people that answer those really quite difficult phone calls where people are in situations with crime or they really need an ambulance. Why has it gone to this level where people's lives could potentially be put at risk?
It's gone to this level because of BT's refusal to come to the negotiating table. It's come to this level because Philip Jansen's gone into hiding. So the blame lies squarely with Philip Jansen and BT. In the first 4 days of action, we were very clear. We did not bring our 999 members out. They wanted to come out. They absolutely wanted to come out. They kept on saying they want to come out. We offered BT again the opportunity to talk. They declined. That's why. So we're not putting anybody at risk. BT are, and it's their fault that it's got to this stage.
In a statement, BT have told us that they're redeploying, and while they think it's reckless, people are going to be answering those phones. Does that kind of neutralise essentially any effects? Because 999 phone calls are going to be answered. People aren't going to be put in risk in the same way, and it basically means that you're standing out here for no reason.
Not at all. We're standing out here because of an imposition of a pay deal. The 999 operators are amongst the lowest paid in the company, and where they got £1,500 imposed on them, the chief exec, Philip Jansen, got 32%, plus all his share bonuses of hundreds of thousands of pounds. So at the end of the day, yes, they have drafted in managers to cover. Disappointing that they've done that, but I understand. But at the end of the day, those managers are not trained to the same level as our members are. So there is a difference. So again, it's down to BT that have done this, and these are questions that you need to really be putting to BT because they're the ones that have been reckless through this, not us.
Jonathan, thank you so much for speaking to us. Obviously, there are picket lines like this up and down the country, but for right now, there aren't any more of these strikes allotted for BT, but both the union and the bosses have not come to a decision yet, so we can expect maybe quite a few more of these in the coming months.
OK, Will, thank you.
Right now, 16 minutes past 8. Let's bring you up to date with the other stories making headlines today. And the Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace, has refuted claims from Moscow during a phone call with his Russian counterpart that Ukraine plans to use a bomb laced with radioactive material against them. Mr. Wallace has warned Russia not to use it as a pretext for his own efforts to step up the conflict.
New research shows house price growth in cities is outstripping increases in surrounding areas. These figures are from the Halifax. Property prices across cities have grown by 9.2% since January, apparently, compared to 7.9% on average in the surrounding areas.
National Highways has announced a £44 million fleet of new gritters that can travel up to 50 miles per hour. Well, they've been assembled as the country prepares for freezing conditions on motorways and A roads this winter. Well, the new faster speeds of the gritters is intended, as we've said, is to reduce long delays on roads.
Yes, I'm finding it hard to get excited by gritters.
Well, when the weather is absolutely terrible, you might now think, driving through the rain, I'll be grateful for those gritters in a few weeks' time.
Mind you, we were told not very long ago that actually it was going to be a comparatively mild winter. The long-term forecast. I don't know if that's true or not, but let's hope it is, just because people haven't got the heating on the same. So actually, a mild winter would be very good for us at the minute, but we shall see.
Now, the countdown is on for the King's coronation next year, and it's believed Charles and Camilla will keep their current home, Clarence House, as their main residence.
Yes, it comes as the palace is set to undergo major renovations, which will take 5 years to complete as the King and Queen prepare for their biggest world tour ever in a bid to bring together Commonwealth countries. Let's talk to our very own Rafe Haydel-Mancou, who's here. Good to see you.
Good morning.
As always. First and foremost, let's talk about this tour, should we? Because a 2-year tour going right across the globe, biggest ever. He's not going to be out of the country for 2 years, is he?
No, these are going to be.
Thank heavens.
These are going to be trips made during the course of the next 2 years. The biggest number of royal overseas engagements since the 1970s, when the Queen embarked on a similar large tour for her Silver Jubilee and surrounding years. But it's important, you know, he's taken on that mantra that the Queen always said: "I have to be seen to be believed." And he wants to hit the ground running. And it's very important, of course, because unlike here in this country, people in Canada and Australia and New Zealand don't get to see the royal family very often, and you need to really cement the bonds at the start of a new reign. It's important that they realise he's just as much their king as he is our king. And so going out to those parts of the larger Commonwealth realms, but also, importantly, the Caribbean, where we know there's been a lot of...
that's an interesting decision.
The Republican debate is very, very strong in those countries. But interestingly, a poll taken a couple of weeks ago in Australia shows that support for the monarchy is at the highest level for years. Over 50% want to keep the monarchy now there, showing some degree of support for King Charles. That we've seen a huge surge in support for him in this country, and it seems as if that's also happening elsewhere too.
So it's part PR campaign, really, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, and without any doubt, it's a PR campaign, but it's also important to remember often people don't realise New Zealand is a monarchy, Australia is a monarchy, and it's important that actually that the crown is seen there. If it's not seen there, people will forget about that, and it's important to stay relevant. And of course, going to Australia will provide an occasion in 2024 to celebrate the 200th anniversary of their oldest legislature in New South Wales. So the monarchy goes to these countries to actually take part in important national and constitutional ceremonies and celebrations to become part of that national story, just like we see them taking part in those things here.
They're due a vote, aren't they? A referendum on the monarchy in 2024-25.
Where in Australia?
Yeah.
Well, the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, has said that he's not going to deal with it in his first 3-year term, but it'll become after that. But he has appointed a Minister for the Republic, which is quite an unusual thing to have happen. But as I said, currently,
good timing,
the monarchy's riding high at the moment, and long may it continue.
Talking about interactions between the royals and politicians, the King is in London today, and of course, when we look at what's happening in our political sphere, that could be significant.
Yes, one wonders why he's in London. Well, he's in London quite a lot, but yes, added significance. It's funny, it's strange to recall that it only was a few weeks ago, of course, that the Queen was in Balmoral shaking hands and appointing, kissing hands, shall we say, with Liz Truss. My gosh, it wasn't that long ago, but how much seems to have happened in those interceding few weeks, both with the Queen's death and the funeral and the political turmoil. This will be the Liz Truss, despite her short reign, the first Prime Minister to serve under two monarchs for 70 years. Yes, we'll see whether Rishi gets the call to come to Buckingham Palace. Now, as we were discussing, Buckingham Palace is undergoing this major renovation, which will take 5 years and will be about £370 million, but it's still open for business. So whilst the King is living at Clarence House, he will be at Buckingham Palace, as will his office staff, and most of the admin will be taking place there. So if Rishi Sunak is called to kiss hands, he will be going to Buckingham Palace, we assume, for that important ceremony.
Right. Isn't it funny? Isn't it funny? I saw a tweet, actually, from someone the other day, yesterday, I can't think who it was now, but saying, my son has lived through 3 Prime Ministers, 3 Chancellors, I don't know how many Home Secretaries, and 2 monarchs, and he's 4 months old.
Yes, well...
it's extraordinary times, isn't it?
Several weeks ago, someone said, I've got some meat in the fridge that's outlasted several Prime Ministers and 2 monarchs too, so...
Hopefully in the freezer, not the fridge,
Let's hope so. Rafe, thank you very much indeed. Lovely stuff. Coming up after the break, we're going to be decoding the world of online dating. So, yeah, you can spot any hidden misogyny on apps like Tinder and Hinge.
That's after the weather.
And looking ahead to the weather, the UK is breezy and mild today with sunny spells and scattered locally heavy showers for most. Let's have a look at the details.
It's going to be breezy, especially around the coast of southwest England, but mainly dry with some bright or sunny spells. There's going to be some scattered, occasionally heavy showers likely, particularly in the west.
And mostly dry across London and the southeast with plenty of sunshine. Rather breezy, especially along the Channel coast where the odd shower is possible.
What about southern and western Wales? Well, scattered locally heavy showers. It's going to be interspersed with some sunny spells. It's rather windy, especially across the coast and the hills. It should feel quite mild, though.
A bit breezy, but mostly dry in the Midlands. Plenty of sunny spells for all. However, the odd shower possible, most likely towards the west.
Now, the east and northeast of England is going to be mostly dry with patchy cloud and sunny spells. The cloud could bring the odd shower. It's feeling nice and warm, though, again, particularly for this time of year.
Scattered locally heavy showers affecting northern and western Scotland. There'll be some sunny spells, but a brisk wind too. Going to feel nice and warm, though, apparently, in the sunshine.
There's going to be a mix of sunny spells and scattered heavy showers across Northern Ireland. The showers most frequent there in the north and the west. It's going to be breezy, but feeling quite mild.
So scattered, locally heavy showers continuing, especially in the west of the UK. Drier and brighter across the east. That's your weather today.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB Newsday with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB Newsday and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
.26, morning to you. Still to come on the programme today, at 8:45, Sunak supporter and former Defence Secretary Dr Liam Fox will be telling us why he thinks Rishi has what it takes to lead the Conservative Party. Let's hope he has, because it looks like he's already got the job.
And then in about half an hour's time, Andrew Pearce will be here giving us his take on the stories making the news today. I'm sure it will be a colourful conversation.
It will.
You are very welcome to join in with. You can email us gbviews@gbnews.uk or drop us a tweet @gbnews.
Now, if you're single, you may turn to the world of dating apps to try to find love. Now, whether it's Tinder or eHarmony or Hinge or Bumble, I don't know, these words mean nothing to me, but there you go. There is no denying, apparently, that if you're single and out there and looking, they are very popular.
But with all this choice comes many downsides, with some users becoming increasingly aware of sexism and misogyny on the platform.
Well, here to help us understand the red flags is Aileen Barrett, author of Tinder Translator, an A to Z and Modern Misogyny, and she's here. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Shed some light on all of this. What's going on?
Well, I think the dating landscape has changed kind of irrecognisably in the last 10 years. Tinder's 10 years old this year. I was in a relationship, I was married and came out of a relationship in 2016. I was looking it up. iPhones didn't exist when I got into that relationship in 2006. And then by the time you come out, it's a completely different landscape. So a shock to the system in that way anyway, because suddenly it's everyone meets like this, you know, instead of like this.
Well, you get a catalogue, of people.
And
they put their best foot forward and their best photographs.
I mean, they don't always put their best foot forward. That's the problem half the time. But, yeah, no, absolutely, that's the idea. And, you know, I remember being like, when I was married, being like, oh, my God, it's so shallow. And then, of course, as soon as I was separated, I was like, just download it, see what it's like. But what I found, and what lots of women find, is that there are a lot of men who don't seem to be able to speak to us respectfully and don't be able, like, you know, just have basic politeness, whatever they're looking for, and, you know, no judgment on whatever you're looking for on dating apps. But it's often kind of depressing to see how many men are still just really disrespectful and sexist to women on these apps.
So what sort of thing have you seen?
So, well, a lot of it I can't talk about on breakfast television. There's a lot of very inappropriateness, so I'll let your viewers imagine that. But you get a lot of men listing demands. So there's a bio that I showed you guys that says, about me, I'm a non-smoker, really. That's all he says about himself. And then he says, you, tall, smart, healthy, fashionable. So it's like, you know, these lists of demands, bringing nothing to the table himself.
I don't think that tall, smart, healthy, fashionable person will be interested in the person who asked for
just
that
a non-smoker. That's the bar is very low.
It's very odd, isn't it?
It's odd, and there's a lot of odd ones. And there's a lot of, when I post them on my account, loads of people will say, oh, just, you know, he can't really think that this is going to work. You know, this can't really think that this is going to attract people. And I just think, I'm not sure he's thinking that hard about it. And in a way, he's kind of doing himself an injustice too.
I mean, we just saw one that came up on screen saying, you, basically a supermodel with smarts, me, bringing absolutely nothing to the table. So, now, is that comedy? Is just
that is my translation of the one that I just read out.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. That's what I do. But, yeah, I mean, but you get some absolute shockers. There's another one here that says, you better start taking some risk, girls, before you turn old, ugly and lonely. Time is ticking. Stop being picky before you run out of your sell-by date.
I mean,
And it's just like, well, nobody's going to go, oh my God, the love of my life. Yeah.
What charmer?
It's hard because Tinder has been really associated with much more casual hookups, but lots of people do find successful relationships.
Yeah.
But there's such a minefield of behaviours to worm yourself way through. Ghosting, that I assume is a new thing since you started dating again, or just organising dates and then it not really being committed to them until you feel like it. I mean, there was a colleague who was telling me the other day who said they'd planned to go for dinner and then eventually there was like leaving quite long gaps between messaging and in the end they said, oh, you can come for a drink, but like basically where I live.
Yeah.
And the friend just said, well, no, I'm sorry. If you can only be bothered to spend time with me if I come all the way to where you are for one drink, well, I'm not interested. So people obviously do manage to make a success of it sometimes, but it's not without a bit of heartache along the way.
It isn't, you know, I think people have to be careful about setting a precedent with stuff like that because, you know, if you are like, oh, yeah, no, I'll come around to yours or whatever, what you're saying is like, yeah, it doesn't matter. I don't need you to meet me halfway. I don't, you know, need you to put any effort in. And then that's the kind of, they're like, right, great. That's the bar. I just have to be like, come and have a drink with me. So it can be, a lot of heartache and a lot of rejection. But I think, you know, you have to kind of take that on the chin and know that, you know, when you meet somebody, you know, and I've met someone through dating apps, you know, I've been in a relationship for 3 years now. So, you know, there are nice people out there, but there's just so many men who just don't seem to know how to talk to women, or if they do, they're not doing, you know, even if they're looking for casual things, they're not going about it in a way that's going to, you know, help their cause.
They need to get themselves back around a bar, don't they, so they can actually learn and see how women respond if they say those sort of things. It's terrifying. Frankly, it's terrifying. Look, really good to see you this morning. Thank you very much
indeed. Thanks for having me.
Right now, it is 8:33. Don't go anywhere because we're going to be going through the papers again with Dawn and Nigel after this.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB Newsday with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB Newsday and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
It's time to go through the papers at 8:35, once again with Dawn Neeson and Nigel Nelson. Morning, you two. We're on the 8 o'clock hour. I'm getting so confused today. Telegraph, Nigel, to begin with.
Indeed, and this is Penny Mordaunt, who's obviously now way behind Rishi Sunak as far as being the next Prime Minister goes. She says she won't back out. But it's one of her allies, the MP Heather Wheeler, and she's saying that she thinks that the making 100 signatures necessary to get on the ballot paper was far too many, and thinks it actually was designed specifically to keep Penny off the ticket. And says that that she's been a victim of sexism because the Tory party didn't want another woman.
Hold on a minute, though. This was agreed by Graham Brady, the 1922 committee. Didn't Helen Wheeler run against Graham Brady about 12 months ago for that job?
Oh, could well have done. Could well have done. I mean, you're better informed than I am on this one. I mean, I think the sexist thing is probably not. I mean, it's just not fair. The reason for the 100 nominations was, A, to make sure you didn't have sort of a dozen candidates, but probably, if anything, it was to keep Boris Johnson off the ticket rather than Penny Mordaunt.
It was just to make it quick, wasn't it?
Well, it also made it quick. Because you'd only, the maximum you'd ever get was 3 candidates anyway, so that would have made it much quicker. But I mean, looking at Boris Johnson claimed 100 supporters on Saturday, which we all found particularly dubious. Again, he was claiming the same number last night. So if the Saturday figure was right, they hadn't gone up in 24 hours. Probably he's more around 60, and so wasn't going to be able to run anyway. So that was the reason for having the 100 nominations, to make sure you really. Well, the idea really was to you get one candidate and row out the party membership.
Penny Mordaunt's written in the Telegraph as well today saying, you know, I know that this requires unity, discipline, competence and honesty. I'm ready to serve, she says. It's very unlikely she's going to get that opportunity. Our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, was sort of laying out the potential paths. If she did get to the 100 threshold, do you think she'd actually fight for it?
Oh, I think she might. I mean, I'd rather hope she would do a deal between now and 2 o'clock with Rishi Sunak, and ideally that he would make her Deputy Prime Minister. That would seem to be the best possible deal she could do. If she gets to the 100, she may well go for it because she would stand a good chance with the party membership.
I just think it's hilarious when we talk about, you know, her possibly pulling out this morning. Well, she's got nothing to pull out of. As she is yet. I mean, that's the thing.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, absolutely right, yeah.
So she would need to get, I think she's meant to be on 25 at the moment.
About 25 seems to be the number she's on.
To go in
quadruple her
few
figures.
Hours, yeah.
Very odd. Dawn, to the Express, looking at Britain's cancer shame.
Yeah, it's a very downbeat story, but it's in a way it's linked to what we have been talking about all morning with Rishi Sunak and the leadership battle. You know, the priority, as we've discussed in one of the other papers about the immigration issue and the boats crossing the Channel, personally, I think one of the bigger issues for everybody is the NHS and the crisis we are currently facing. This is a very scary report that are 55 days from GP referral to start of treatment for cancer patients. We have one of the worst countries of developed nations for cancer mortality, and that we come 33 out of 41 countries, the worst survival rate in the G7. And this is, you know, it's got worse since 2020. The fact that we are, you know, if you are a cancer patient, you are now waiting 20% longer than you were at the beginning of 2020. I mean, 55 days, you know, from being diagnosed with cancer, it's a long, long time. I mean, that can be the difference between life and death. So I think for most people watching and listening this morning, this has to be a priority. I mean, where you even start unpacking the current mess that is the NHS, I greater brains than me have tried to struggle with that one. But the fact that 55 days of that stress, that anxiety and that worry hanging over you, it's just terrifying, and it depends obviously on the diagnosis and what stage you're at, but it could be the difference between life and death. So it's a very worrying report, but it's a necessary report to take note of, I think. And let's hope Rishi, if it is Rishi, is going to tackle this issue as soon as he can.
Yeah.
Let's look in the mail, shall we, Nigel? And a real achievement of one woman, something to celebrate.
Yay.
First female soldier passes the Army's demanding course. It's utterly gruelling.
Yeah, well, it sounds absolutely awful. I wouldn't even try it. But this is Addie Carter, who's 21 from Hereford. And she's the first woman soldier to be able to complete this course, just to show how sort of difficult the whole thing was, that there were 98 candidates when they started, and only 59 out of those were successful. So you can see how difficult that was. She's actually a medic rather than a combat soldier, but obviously we're moving further and further into women going in the front line, as they do in Israel. That I mean, there you've got women go straight into national service immediately after school. Last time I was there on a job, I went to the Ministry of Defence there. It was rather like going to St Trinian's. There were lots of sort of schoolgirls running around in uniform and stuff like that. But they serve in the armed forces, and it seems to work really well.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's plenty of women getting into the armed forces, but I mean, getting through this powers test is the airborne.
You're going to elite. The great thing here is that this is an elite regiment.
Oh,
so it's the fact that she's managed to actually make an elite regiment, and the next stage for her is to start doing a bit of parachuting.
I love the fact it says Gruding para test is no match. Well, it will have been a match for her, as it's a match for everyone who goes through.
And there were no concessions made either.
Oh, no.
She did exactly the same test as all the men involved.
They've got to be.
Quality.
They've all got to be on a par.
Of course they have. I love that story. Fair play to her.
We were talking to Emily Thornbury earlier on, as you know, and you've got a story about White Van Man Dawn in the Times.
I've seen this link there. See what you did, and I picked this story because it's basically you'd like this, right?
Can I just reflect on just for a second?
Go on.
I know this is very self-indulgent, but when Emily Thornbury got booted out because she made those horrible comments about White Van Man, and then Ed Miliband was interviewed about it, I remember you saying, when I think of a white van, when I see a white van, all I think is respect. And I just thought, how do you think you can pull that off as a line? I mean, honestly, he was hopeless, wasn't he?
Yeah, that's yes, that's
frankly.
And
anyway, back to your
there's
story.
a lot of hopeless. Yes. I'm not hopeless. You're not.
No, you're
I'm
not.
Hopeless.
No, you're
thank
brilliant.
You. Well, just in case. Right, OK, so, yeah, basically, this is a new survey by Mercedes-Benz, and they have discovered that 43% of van drivers are now women. Now, the phrase white van man was actually coined in 1997, so it's been around for a long time.
It's a bit like, was it part of the Mondeo man type thing?
I think it was, yeah, maybe even predating that. I mean, it feels like a long time ago. But, I mean, you had this image of builders, all right, darling, in the morning, you know, with their Emily Thornbury, sort of like England flags, etc.
You love a bit of that, I bet you do.
Oh, I love a bit of that, Stephen, I really do.
Seriously, or do you find it offensive?
What?
When you know, if you've got the all right, darling.
No,
right.
morning, darling. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah,
but I've always loved it. It's nothing. Rose is pulling your face. Sorry.
It just more depends on it more depends on context. I remember as a young teenager getting sort of, you know, people shouting at you outside of their van or from their scaffolding and finding it really horrible.
If you're younger, of course, if you're young,
and I think that culture is not helpful.
No, but I mean,
did you find it scary or just
it just totally.
just
I mean,
annoying?
If I was by myself and lots of people, a van went past and there was lots of people, or if more than that, actually, it was a building site and you walk past and you suddenly were the centre of attention on the pavement and everybody's looking at you.
How many people are cheering at you?
I really
Lady
think
Gaga
other people
walking
will be able to empathise with
Yes,
being in this situation, and it's kind of it's irrelevant what you're wearing. You might just be suddenly the subject of attention, and it's more as a teenage girl acutely embarrassing, not necessarily. It's just not what you want on your journey to school.
I think obviously there's a generation thing here. I mean, certainly if you're a young girl, certainly if you're wearing school uniform. But I mean, a cheery "Good morning, darling," I don't find sexually offensive in any way, type or form. But this is destroying all the cliches of white van man stroke woman stroke person. As I said, 51% of the female white van drivers read broadsheets rather than tabloid, because that was the image, wasn't it? Red top tabloid on the dashboard, feet up, etc., etc. 25% don't eat red meat, or don't eat meat, full stop, and 85% voted in the last general election. Possibly not for Emily Thornbury, but I mean, so it's just changing the image of the white van thing. It's
I suppose.
But
which isn't a bad thing, but you know, mind you, they can start wolf whistling at the hot fellas who walk past.
I have to confess, I have done that once. Sorry, am I allowed to do that?
No, do you know, I was in. No, this sounds really up my own. But I got whistled at by some people when I was in Spain.
Oh, did you enjoy it?
It was Blooming great, actually.
Oh.
It was two old ladies in a car. Two old ladies in a car. Oh, guapo.
This is one hell of an admission.
And it was... But, you know, I loved it.
Oh.
I loved it. It was just like, oh.
Did they have the guide dogs with them?
Yes, they did. Yes. You're being fair enough. Thanks very much. I'm appealing to a lady of a certain age, over 90 probably.
I'm here.
If you've been watching the programme this morning, you'll know that BT staff members are on strike today, including 999 call handlers. But Nigel, today, ambulance staff begin voting whether they should go on strike action as well.
Yeah, it's just more bad news for the NHS one way or another, isn't it? And these are GMB members. What they've been offered is 4%, and it's just not enough. I mean, I tend to agree with that. We're inflation now of over 10%, and the idea of offering these kind of paltry amounts just doesn't cut it. So 15,000 of them will ballot about whether or not they can walk out. Obviously, they won't all walk out. There'll be some kind of emergency cover. It may be some sort of different form of industrial action. But we've now got virtually across the entire health service with midwives, nurses, NHS workers, all talking about industrial action. And again, I think that as Dawn was just saying, that the new Prime Minister, which we now settled on is going to be Rishi Sunak, really has to get a grip on this and deal with it. But I do think the pay awards at the moment really are particularly mean.
Right. Well, look, on that note, we have to leave it. Dawn, Nigel, thank you both very much.
I didn't get to do my pet story.
No, you didn't, but do you know what? We did it yesterday morning.
Oh, did you?
Yeah,
Oh,
so
get you then.
I was going to miss it out anyway.
Whatever.
Frankly. Should have been watching yesterday morning.
Bothered.
Rebellion in the ranks.
Oh, get off, you two. Honestly, you've had your time. You've had your time. Thank you both very much indeed. Now, as Nigel was saying, Rishi Sunak's the next Prime Minister of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. You can pretty much guarantee.
Not quite, but
well,
nearly.
Not quite, I don't know. Well, let's see what one of his supporters thinks. Former International Trade Secretary and Defence Secretary Dr Liam Fox. Good to see you this morning. He's got the job, hasn't he?
Good morning. Well, not until nominations close and we know the result. Clearly, he's got a very strong support from the Parliamentary Party, but you know, especially given events of recent times, I think anyone who takes anything for granted these days needs to just look at the last few weeks. So I think we'll all just wait, not take things for granted, keep talking to our colleagues and get to 2 o'clock safely.
Come 2 o'clock, we know what you're hoping will be the result, because obviously you're supporting Rishi Sunak. He didn't manage to persuade the party membership 6 weeks ago. What's he learnt in that time? Because he's going to need support, not just of the party, the membership, but the public too.
Well, I think it's what we've all learned. We've all learned that you can't buck the markets, that you have to have policies that maintain confidence in our public finances, and that the number one enemy is inflation, and that there are no shortcuts to getting the economic circumstances right.
Look, it's an extraordinary time for him to be taking over, which we expect him to do, because there is an awful lot on his plate. He's got to really focus on stability now. I mean, that's got to be the key message, hasn't it? Stability, fiscal strength, regaining more sort of fiscal and energy independence. Can he get all of this turned around before a general election, even if he was to hold off till the very last minute?
Well, the thing is, I think you're exactly right. These are the things that Rishi's been talking about for a long time. And we've got a problem with inflation. That's not just in the UK, but it's in many parts of the world. And there will be a price to pay for that inflation in terms of people's standard of living. Therefore, the most important task for the government is to get that under control. And as you correctly say again, fiscal stability and getting the markets to understand that the government is committed to sound public finances will be absolutely key. There are going to be rises in interest rates because the Federal Reserve in America is driving American rates up. The rest of the world will follow. What we have to make sure is that we are not paying higher interest rates than we otherwise have to, given the global conditions. And that means that we maximise confidence of those who are lending the UK money. Remember, we're a country that is still borrowing money. We still spend more money than we raise, and therefore we will have to convince those that we borrow money from that we're a good risk. That means getting our public finances sorted, and then once we've done that, ensuring that the proceeds of that are well divided between what we want to see in terms of reducing taxes and the investment in public services that we also want to see. But you have to get the stability first.
Forgive me, that, I mean, that's going to be years away, isn't it? I mean, what is pretty clear is, and which is going to pose a problem for a general election, even if you hold it off till the end of 2024, is that this is going to hurt. I mean, he's going to be a Prime Minister who's going to deliver a very painful pill for us to swallow.
Well, what we need to be is realistic with the British people, be honest with them, and to have the best judgment possible. Rishi's already shown through the furlough that he's got good economic judgment. I think many of the things that he said might happen have come to pass in recent times. And I think it's about giving people the confidence that the government's got the right formula for the longer term. People aren't totally short-termist. They want to see that the government is taking them down the right path, and I think we'll be judged on whether we've got the right policies to put our country on a sound footing. People know that there's a global problem post-pandemic and post the Ukrainian shock, and we will want to give confidence that we can deal with those issues and that we know what the correct path for the United Kingdom is going to be in the medium term.
We know what the public currently think of the party. The polling is absolutely catastrophic right now for the Conservatives. How can Rishi Sunak not just sort out public finances, but restore public confidence in him and the party?
Well, I think the first thing is to heal the economy, to make sure we're on the right path. The second thing is to unite the party, and that means bringing in all the best talent that we've got to the government, and not simply be a government about who supported the leader of the day. And I think those things will make the Conservative Party a more effective political force. Unity and competence, I think, are the two things that the public expect from the Conservative Party.
We talked to Emily Thornberry earlier on, and you'll have not be remotely surprised that all she was talking about was a general election. Right? It's an expected script from the Labour Party and the Lib Dems and the SNP. However, there is a sense that the British people, when polled, the majority would want to see a general election. Now, they're feeling left out of this. They're feeling disconnected. They're feeling that no one's got a real mandate.
Well, first of all, this Parliament has more than 2 years to run. The government has a big majority in the House of Commons, and we were elected on a manifesto in 2019 which we have to deliver upon. There's no need for a general election. In fact, I would think the last thing that the country required was the instability of a general election. The government's got a job to do. We have a mandate because we were elected on a manifesto in 2019 that we still have to deliver upon. We've started, but we're a long way to go. And the government will be judged by the electorate when it's time for an election in a couple of years' time.
But, I mean, Gordon Brown, the Labour Party had a mandate when Gordon Brown took over, but, of course, the Conservative Party at the time was demanding a general election. The papers did. It was all bottle of Brown, wasn't it, when he decided not to have one? I mean, you're all as bad as each other, aren't you, when in opposition calling for these sort of things?
That's what oppositions do. They call for elections. The job of the government is to deliver for the British people. We had a manifesto upon which we were elected. We have 2 years to deliver. We'll be judged on whether, at the end of that time, we have delivered on those promises.
I just very quickly want to know what you'd say to someone like John, who's messaged this morning to say, I've resigned my membership of the Conservative Party. I've been appalled by the way the party have behaved. They no longer encourage the values of loyalty, aspiration and growth that they did when I first voted Tory over 40 years ago.
Well, I disagree that the values have changed, but I think he's quite right. I think that the recent weeks have been shambolic, and I think the party now has to get the trust of all the British people, including those who have long been our supporters. And I think that what they're looking for is calm, confident, competent government, a Conservative government that believes in sound money, that believes in aspiration and rewards effort. I hope that the progress that I believe we will make will convince those that the Conservative Party is still on their side. the alternatives, let me tell you, are appalling. So, but it's up to us, and I accept that in recent times the Conservative Party, by its behaviour, has not shown a great example. I hope that once this leadership campaign is over, and if Rishi Sunak does become Prime Minister, I believe he has all the qualities to give us that confident and competent government.
OK, Liam Fox, as always, it's good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed.
Don't go anywhere. We've got more on the Conservative leadership race. It's all changing minute by minute here today. By 2 p.m, we should have a lot more clarity. Stick with GB News for it. Don't go anywhere. Next, the weather.
And looking ahead to the weather, the UK is breezy and mild today with sunny spells and scattered locally heavy showers for most. Let's have a look at the details.
It's going to be breezy, especially around the coast of southwest England, but mainly dry with some bright or sunny spells. There's going to be some scattered, occasionally heavy showers likely, particularly in the west.
And mostly dry across London and the southeast with plenty of sunshine. Rather breezy, especially along the Channel coast where the odd shower is possible.
What about southern and western Wales? Well, scattered locally heavy showers. It's going to be interspersed with some sunny spells. It's rather windy, especially across the coast and the hills. It should feel quite mild, though.
A bit breezy, but mostly dry in the Midlands. Plenty of sunny spells for all. However, the odd shower possible, most likely towards the west.
Now, the east and northeast of England is going to be mostly dry with patchy cloud and sunny spells. The cloud could bring the odd shower. It's feeling nice and warm, though, again, particularly for this time of year.
Scattered locally heavy showers affecting northern and western Scotland. There'll be some sunny spells, but a brisk wind too. Going to feel nice and warm, though, apparently, in the sunshine.
There's going to be a mix of sunny spells and scattered heavy showers across Northern Ireland. The showers most frequent there in the north and the west. It's going to be breezy, but feeling quite mild.
So scattered, locally heavy showers continuing, especially in the west of the UK. Drier and brighter across the east. That's your weather today.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Rishi Sunak leads the race for number 10 after Boris Johnson drops out.
Good morning to you. It's 9 o'clock. It's Monday, the 24th of October. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Rosie.
Right, here's what's leading the news then. So the former Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, looks like he's going to become Britain's next Prime Minister after Boris Johnson withdrew from the leadership race late last night. Now, in a statement, he said now was not the right time for him to return.
The other leadership candidate, Penny Mordaunt, is now facing pressure to drop out, allowing Sunak to become Prime Minister without the decision to be put to the party membership.
Also today, 999 emergency call workers will walk out as BT and Openreach stage a strike action, again in a dispute over pay. We'll be live from the picket line.
Love to hear from you this morning. The views are ridiculous today, just like pages and pages and pages of GB Views at gbnews.uk. Join in our conversation and make my desk even more cluttered, why don't you? Now, in the very latest plot twist in the Conservative Party leadership race, Boris Johnson has now ruled himself out of the nominations.
Well, this is what he said. I believe I have much to offer, but I'm afraid that this is simply not the right time.
Now, the race could be finished today because if Penny Mordaunt doesn't secure 100 supporters, which is looking impossible at this stage, Rishi Sunak will become the next leader of the Conservative Party and the new Prime Minister. Oh, we've got a very special guest for you. Well, I mean, he's here all the time. But Andrew Pearce is here for you. And we should say, actually on Thursday, you're going to be doing this job, aren't you?
I'm going to be sitting in your seat.
I don't like that at all.
Next to the fabulous Rosie, who's going to hold my hand for the 3.5 hours.
Poor Rosie.
Yeah. If it was with you, I'd be worried you'd be holding something else.
Yes, all right. Thank you, Andrew. This is why.
Less of that on Thursday, please,
This is why I'll
Andrew.
never be working with you full time. Look. We all this talk about, Penny Mordaunt should pull out and all the rest of it. She's not going to make it onto the ballot paper, is she?
It was decided, I think, as early as Saturday morning that Rishi Sunak is the next Prime Minister. Boris didn't have the numbers, despite the bluster. We know that Boris is very good at bluster. Penny Mordaunt's got about 25 names. I don't know why she hasn't already pulled out. She's obviously, if she can get the numbers higher, she'll be hoping she can get a bigger job out of Rishi Sunak. But it's Rishi Sunak by a country mile. It's a coronation. It's probably the best thing, so we can get on with it because this country is in a terrible mess. And Rishi Sunak can go into number 10 this afternoon, reshuffle the cabinet and get on with governing.
Yeah.
For some of the cabinet, this is a bit awkward because they threw their hat in with someone. It might be Sunak or Liz Truss and then Boris Johnson, and it's all fallen apart. So who actually are Rishi's real allies?
Well, his people like Steve Barclay, who was, what was he in the last... Oh, God, they've all changed their jobs so often.
Oh, no, it's impossible to keep up.
It's hard to keep up. But I think a good ally of his is Jeremy Hunt, so I would be surprised if Jeremy Hunt doesn't stay as Chancellor. Dominic Raab may come back. He was a Foreign Secretary and then he was a Justice Secretary. He's a big supporter of Rishi Sunak. But even people like Liam Fox on the traditional Thatcherite right of the party, big Sunak supporters because they see Sunak as a calming influence, somebody who won't spook the market. Tell you who's in a really big bind. Nadeem Sahawi. Now, he's the Cabinet Office Minister. He's like the troubleshooter, goes around every department sorting things out. So he was made Chancellor of the Exchequer by Boris when Boris was desperately trying to save his government. And then he put the knife in Boris just before Boris fell on his sword, backing Boris to the hilt yesterday. 9 o'clock last night, an online article appears on The Telegraph from Nadeem Sahawi saying why Boris is the man for the job. 2 minutes later, Boris pulls out. And 5 minutes later, Nadeem Sahawi says, Rishi Sunak, he's the man for the job. I think his cabinet career might be over.
Which is a shame, because I mean, he was vaccines minister, wasn't
He was very good.
Where he was absolutely lauded.
He was very good, but just a bit too much somersaulting here.
Yeah.
And I think Boris also was exacting revenge for the fact that he pulled the rug from under his feet when he'd made him Chancellor.
Yeah.
So,
revenge is a dish best eaten cold.
Oh, isn't it just?
Boris Johnson never actually officially said, I'm going for it, but has very much officially said, I'm out. Staging for a comeback later on?
It's interesting, Rosie, because the Tories cannot possibly change Prime Minister again before the next general election, so Rishi Sunak leads the Tories into the next election. Looking at the polls, they're going to lose, and lose pretty badly. I can't see Boris Johnson as a leader of the opposition.
No.
It's not his... He wouldn't be cut out for that. You don't get checkers, you don't get the perks, you don't get the motor dispatch riders, you don't get all the perks. And he's also going to have a huge task in holding on to his seat. It's a marginal seat in West London, majority of about 6,000. Labour will throw everything at that seat to try and get him out. So I suspect we've seen the last... that was the last hurrah of Boris. He can now go back to America and earn lots of money, making speeches, £150,000 a time. I saw one fee, $300,000. Look, if Theresa May gets £100,000 for a speech, and you pay $100,000 not to hear her speak because she's so boring, Boris Johnson's easy going to get more. So I think probably that's it from Boris Johnson, which is a great shame because he's one of the greatest political talents we've seen.
Well, and yet you don't think he was right for coming back now, did you? I mean, you did. So what does this mean for, like, all of this, right?
Yeah.
Which is essentially all people saying, I will never vote Tory again now that it's Rishi.
Yeah, well, you'll get that, but there were also some Tory MPs who would have resigned the whip. There'd have been problems in the parliamentary party because a lot of them who were standing down would just simply say they couldn't work with him. It was probably too soon. He only stood down, 3 months ago? The wounds are still there. You hear people who lost people during COVID, didn't get to see their husbands, wives, family, while there were parties going on at Number 10. And still, Stephen, don't forget, we've got this Privileges Committee inquiry into whether Boris misled Parliament as to whether parties took place and whether the rules are broken. That committee could recommend he's kicked out of Parliament. By-election could be all over then. Imagine if that had happened when he was Prime Minister. Oh, my God.
So,
psychodrama.
Well, wouldn't it be?
Rishi Sunak's actually played this pretty well over the last few weeks. He's been really quiet. He hasn't had to say, I told you so, because the facts spoke for themselves.
He's been very clever, actually. I've done a piece about him this morning saying on social media, he tweeted once on the death of the Queen, made no comment on the problems that were going on in Liz Truss's government, no problem when the Chancellor was sacked. He kept his counsel. He'd said during the leadership contest that he thought her plans for the economy were fantasy, fairy tale economics. And he then was back on social media yesterday saying, I'm running for the leadership. He's been diplomatic and discreet. He got a lot of plaudits from MPs who are backing him because he did call it right on Trussonomics.
Yeah, but also, has he learned a lesson in the sense that ready for Rishi?
I
mean, to me, it was too slick. Some of the videos that went out, I mean, they were absolutely sick-wrenching.
I know, and he's a very wealthy man, as we know, because his wife's worth £720 million. He's rich in his own right. And he had a very expensive, glossy campaign, and it was too glossy. And then there were silly mistakes like wearing a £500 pair of Prada shoes on a building site.
Yeah.
And a lot of people didn't think much to his very tight, figure-hugging £3,500 suits. This is going to be a problem for him when he tries to empathise with people during the cost of living crisis. This will be an issue, and Labour will play it for all it's worth.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I don't think we should bar rich people from becoming politicians.
No.
Very successful.
Where does this leave Labour in all of it? I mean, obviously, they're calling for a general election.
Of course they are.
Right?
Boring.
I mean, Emily Thornbury was doing it. No, it's not going to happen. They're just not going to give way to it.
No.
But saying to Emily Thornbury earlier on, well, if you're wanting an election, if you're putting the country on an election footing, right, as far as they're concerned, why aren't we getting more of the small print on Labour and what their plans are?
Quite. She won't even tell you whether the 1p in the income tax cut, which was in the Truss quasi-Kwarteng budget, which has been overturned now by Jeremy Hunt, whether they would still support it. They are just relying on the Tories screwing up, and they're saying nothing, hoping that's the best approach. Well, they have been screwing up monumentally, but now, hopefully, Rishi Sunak's going to restore some vigour, and he will be forensic in his approach to Keir Starmer, in a way Boris couldn't be, really, because that's not his strength. So I think Labour are going to have to raise their game, and these poll figures of 35-point lead for the birds, it's nothing like that.
Really?
No. In real terms, I suspect they're probably in double figures, 12, 14 points, which is enough to give them a comfortable victory, and it is theirs to lose. But I don't think Keir Starmer's particularly dynamic, do you?
Well,
boring is the word I'd use.
Oh, yeah, but
maybe people want boring. There's a bit of boring right now.
Yeah,
Rishi's
I get
a bit
that,
boring.
Yeah, Rosie says perhaps that's what the country want. We had the glamour, we had the boosterism of Boris and all that talk, and people now perhaps think we do need more sober government.
Yeah.
And that's what we'll get with Rishi.
Yeah, OK. Andrew, thank you.
Nice to talk to you.
prepping for
You wishing me
Thursday.
luck for Thursday?
Good luck on Thursday.
I think I'm the one who needs the
Rosie,
luck,
you do, because
actually,
you're going to have to hold my hand the
be
whole way
Try and
through.
provide some balance behind the table. It's going to be...
Oh, God, yeah, because I don't really do balance.
No, you don't do balance.
You will on Thursday, Andrew.
News programme.
Oh, yes, that's right. So, I'll do balance on Thursday. You'll see a new side to me.
Okay, interesting.
Looking forward to that.
I would say I'd be watching, but I'm going to be sleeping in. I've got a day off, so there you go.
Andrew, thank you very much. So what does the future hold for Boris Johnson now? Well, let's head to his constituency of Uxbridge. Our national reporter, Paul Hawkins, is there. Paul, a very good morning. So his constituents, what do they reckon?
Yeah, well, we've been here about an hour and a half now. Been speaking to a variety of people this morning, and this is what they've been telling us about the news that Boris Johnson is not going to be in the running for Prime Minister anymore.
Terrible. So many things that he did wrong.
But he won an election.
Yeah, I know, but there's a lot of people out there that don't know, that don't read stuff.
Yeah.
And don't look into stuff.
Yeah.
Just believe the hype.
Liar. Right, because a lot of people think he's a winner, and you know he got the COVID vaccine out.
No, he did that. He done all that. Yeah, he's a liar.
Right. Okay. So I'm going to assume you're welcoming the decision that he's not going to stand for Prime Minister.
I'm over the moon.
I want him to be the Prime Minister.
Why? What? Really? Why's that?
Well, because of his policies. He's for the ordinary people. Fair enough, he's done wrong. But don't we all do wrong at times?
Yeah. He's playing games, I think. A bit like we worked with a chess company, Homer Sharif, when he had up in London. And it's like, so I think Boris is having a break, and he'll come back in 2 years' time.
Yeah. Would you like to see that in 2 years' time?
Yeah, he's got charisma, he's good. He's done a lot of good for a lot of people.
Yeah, so that's what people have been telling us this morning then. Some disappointed that Boris Johnson isn't running for Prime Minister, but they're still holding out for hope maybe that he'll be back in a couple of years' time, if indeed that is when we have the next general election.
OK, Paul, thank you. Yeah, I mean, there's still so much to play for. Whilst Rishi Sunak is going to be the next Prime Minister, I'm saying that outright, even though other people are being a bit more careful around the edges, he's just going to be. Now, there's a way, there's no way around it now. But of course, this general election pressure is going to keep piling and piling up. But are they going to take any notice of that? Probably not.
Yes, I think that what they need to do, well, in the view of Andrew Pearce just now, is to provide some stability if he can. And Rishi Sunak's job is to provide political stability, economic stability, and persuade not only the party but also the public that he can do both of those things. But we'll be watching it all.
I'll tell you what, I'm intrigued by so many of you getting in touch saying you will not vote Tory again because of Rishi Sunak. I guess what I would say to you is, of course, you're perfectly entitled to a view, but I guess they're not appealing to you, even though you may be Tory voters. It's about expanding the appeal of Tories to people who currently say they would vote Labour. And it's the broader appeal that matters. It's reaching the middle ground, centre ground in politics is what matters. And where would you go? Are you going to be homeless? Do you need a new party? Anyway, on all of these issues, we're going to be talking to our very own Nigel Farage in a couple of minutes. He'll give us his view on the political drama. And looking ahead to the weather, the UK is breezy and mild today with sunny spells and scattered locally heavy showers for most. Let's have a look at the details.
It's going to be breezy, especially around the coast of southwest England, but mainly dry with some bright or sunny spells. There's going to be some scattered, occasionally heavy showers likely, particularly in the west.
And mostly dry across London and the southeast with plenty of sunshine. Rather breezy, especially along the Channel coast where the odd shower is possible.
What about southern and western Wales? Well, scattered locally heavy showers. It's going to be interspersed with some sunny spells. It's rather windy, especially across the coast and the hills. It should feel quite mild, though.
A bit breezy, but mostly dry in the Midlands. Plenty of sunny spells for all. However, the odd shower possible, most likely towards the west.
Now, the east and northeast of England is going to be mostly dry with patchy cloud and sunny spells. The cloud could bring the odd shower. It's feeling nice and warm, though, again, particularly for this time of year.
Scattered locally heavy showers affecting northern and western Scotland. There'll be some sunny spells, but a brisk wind too. Going to feel nice and warm, though, apparently, in the sunshine.
There's going to be a mix of sunny spells and scattered heavy showers across Northern Ireland. The showers most frequent there in the north and the west. It's going to be breezy, but feeling quite mild.
So scattered, locally heavy showers continuing, especially in the west of the UK. Drier and brighter across the east. That's your weather today.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB Newsday with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB Newsday and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
(9:17), morning to you. Now, a lot of people who are angry with the Conservative Party and disappointed by Labour are crying out for change. Well, writing in The Telegraph yesterday, a certain Mr Nigel Farage appealed for the reform of the country's electoral system. And he's here in the studio. Morning, Nigel.
Good morning.
So what are you wanting to see?
We have an outdated system. We have a 19th century system for electing people in the 21st century. There are lots of different views. It isn't just Conservative and Labour. There are lots of different views out there. And under a first-past-the-post electoral system, they rarely get any representation in Parliament. Take the Greens. You know, there's a significant number of people in this country who support the Green agenda. I think it's crackers, but that's not the point. Yeah. Lots of people do. They have one MP with no prospect of getting any more. I mean, I led UKIP in 2015 to 4 million votes and 1 seat. Now, never before in the history of the system has anybody got that number of votes and that few seats. That can't be right. And what it does, it says to you, I'm living in a safe Tory seat. I'm living in a safe Labour seat. What is the point on a rainy Thursday of going down to the polling station?
But what's the alternative? Proportional representation, which doesn't that ultimately mean then you are never going to get a solid government? Are you going to have instability?
Depends how you do it. Depends what form of PR you go for. But, you know, the argument against coalitions, look, this country had a coalition from 2010 to 2015. Actually, tell you what, it's a lot more stable than a majority Conservative government's been. And Germany, since 1945, has had perpetual coalitions and yet been a very, very successful country. So I don't buy this argument that coalition government is necessarily bad.
Mm. Do you know, the biggest cry there's going to be today in terms of reforming democracy is from people saying, how is it that we're going to be on our third Prime Minister without there being a general election? You're fighting against that sort of tidal wave of concern before people start looking at, well, how do we measure how we count the votes?
In the short term, yes. You know, I mean, here's the odd thing. We kind of vote as if it's a presidential system.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yet it's not. And members of Parliament who come and sit in this chair and talk to you, who believe they've got their own personal majority, it's for the birds. People voted against Corbyn last time round, for Boris and for Brexit. So we have a very odd system, but I tell you what, over the course of the last few years, support for proportional representation is growing very strongly. It's growing within the Labour Party. Lord Mandelson, for example, now says Labour should move to this system. I think the next general election will be the last one ever contested under pure first past the post. I think a degree of proportionality is coming, and I think it's wanted.
It's interesting. I mean, should there be at the next election a Lib Lab coalition or some Lib Lab pact, or anything, then that would cement PR, wouldn't it?
That would
between the
guarantee
two of
it.
them?
Yeah, I mean, we had a farce back in 2011 when Nick Clegg agreed to a referendum on a system that wasn't proportional but preferential, which you couldn't explain in a sentence. And that, I mean, it was ludicrous. One of the worst deals in history. So, yes, I think it is... Look, I mean, yeah, the Tories, there's no chance of them getting back with a majority. And I think this option is going to be on the table and we should talk about it. And frankly, while we're talking about it, let's talk about the House of Lords. You know, I mean, the idea that Liz Truss can appoint people to sit in the House of Lords after 44 days as PM, the whole thing's a farce. So I'm actually all for a complete shake-up of the whole system.
Can I just ask then, I mean, PR, if you're working off a list system, for example, and you can see how it, it reflects democracy, but how does that then help constituencies? Because those constituents are not going to necessarily know or be invested in who they end up with as a Member of Parliament.
So Tony Blair commissioned the late Lord Jenkins to do a huge review of this back in the late 1990s, the Jenkins Report. And he said it is an advantage to have a man or woman that represents Guildford, for argument's sake, because people know who the MP is, and when their drains are blocked, that's who they write to. So what Jenkins recommended was something called AV+, 2 ballot papers, one for the man or woman to represent your constituency, and the second, which would be the last 25% of seats in Parliament, for an opinion. And any significant opinion that gets, say, more than 5% of the vote, you know, we don't want hundreds of parties with tiny numbers of votes, any significant opinion then gets into Westminster. So it would be a hybrid with 2 ballot papers, but very easy to explain.
Right.
That's the vision. Let's talk about the vision of politics today, because it's changed very dramatically over the last 4 days, and then even last night again. It looks more than likely that Rishi Sunak's going to be Prime Minister.
It is.
What do you think that means for not
I'm
just
glad
the
someone
party?
in that seat will admit it, Nigel.
What does it mean for the party and for the country? Because Rishi Sunak has got such a tall order in trying to unite the party and persuade the public he can do that.
Look, the personalities, of course, of Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak are enormously different. You can believe that Boris Johnson had 102 supporters if you want to, if you really, really want to.
We know about 50 publicly were prepared to say they'd support him, and the others we don't know.
I've never believed a word he said. But what I will say is this. He's a much better campaigner. He appeals more to those more working-class voters in the red wall, without which the Conservatives haven't got a chance. I think Rishi is a disaster as far as those voters are concerned for the Conservative Party. Too detached, too remote, doesn't connect in any way at all. In policy terms, the difference between the two is negligible. You know, Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng did at least try to change the direction of our economy. They bungled it, they mishandled it. But what we're going to get with Sunak is the state will get bigger, handouts will get bigger, taxes will go higher, and the same economic model that's failed us for the last 20 years will be maintained.
So what do we do then for the people who... And to be fair, we've had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of emails this morning of people saying they will no longer vote Tory because of this. What do they do? I mean, Reform Party?
Well, Reform is going to stand. I mean, Richard Tice has got 500 candidates already. He's going to stand and give it a go. I think he'll get a lot of votes. But under this first-past-the-post system...
It's not going to get...
And that's the real frustration with it. I have to say, if there was an election next month, I think we'd get the lowest turnout of modern times. The level of disenchantment with politics is the highest I can really ever remember it.
Yeah, and which is democracy going wrong, isn't it? If people just think it's a complete waste of time.
Yeah, and if you really look at it now, what are the differences between Labour and the Conservatives? Almost nothing. Almost nothing. On the big issues, they're very, very close together. It's sort of, they're all kind of social democrat parties. But whichever way you cut it, the model isn't working. And I think Sunak, what you'll read in the next few weeks in the Conservative newspapers is stability. But it's stability with a series of policies not connecting. And as I say, I think Sunak's biggest failure will be in the red wall. There is no way he's going to connect.
Nigel, really good to see you. Thank you for coming in nice and early.
Thank you.
Fascinating, isn't it? I mean, whatever your view is, whether you agree with Nigel or not, it is a fascinating conversation to be having, and politics is getting turned on its head at the moment. What do you think? Let us know, and we'll be back tomorrow morning, won't we?
Yes, I expect the Prime Minister in place. 6 a.m. tomorrow. We'll see you then. Tom Harwood will be next, though, with the briefing. We'll see you tomorrow.
And looking ahead to the weather, the UK is breezy and mild today with sunny spells and scattered locally heavy showers for most. Let's have a look at the details.
It's going to be breezy, especially around the coast of southwest England, but mainly dry with some bright or sunny spells. There's going to be some scattered, occasionally heavy showers likely, particularly in the west.
And mostly dry across London and the southeast with plenty of sunshine. Rather breezy, especially along the Channel coast where the odd shower is possible.
What about southern and western Wales? Well, scattered locally heavy showers. It's going to be interspersed with some sunny spells. It's rather windy, especially across the coast and the hills. It should feel quite mild, though.
A bit breezy, but mostly dry in the Midlands. Plenty of sunny spells for all. However, the odd shower possible, most likely towards the west.
Now, the east and northeast of England is going to be mostly dry with patchy cloud and sunny spells. The cloud could bring the odd shower. It's feeling nice and warm, though, again, particularly for this time of year.
Scattered locally heavy showers affecting northern and western Scotland. There'll be some sunny spells, but a brisk wind too. Going to feel nice and warm, though, apparently, in the sunshine.
There's going to be a mix of sunny spells and scattered heavy showers across Northern Ireland. The showers most frequent there in the north and the west. It's going to be breezy, but feeling quite mild.
So scattered, locally heavy showers continuing, especially in the west of the UK. Drier and brighter across the east. That's your weather today.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the people